The smile training reflex. There's a subtle, invisible training that shapes your entire life, starting so early that you can't remember when it began. Maybe it was in a classroom, or at the dinner table, or simply in the wordless expectations in the air around your childhood. Whenever your feelings edged towards sadness or pain, you learned, sometimes gently, sometimes harshly, that those emotions made others uneasy. The lesson was clear. If you want to belong, to be safe, to avoid trouble, you must keep your discomfort hidden. You must smile. Even when your chest aches, even when your stomach knots, you show your teeth and try to look bright, agreeable, and fine. Over time, that smile becomes automatic, a muscle memory so deep you're no longer aware of performing it. You flash it at strangers, at friends, at family, at colleagues, even when you feel like you're breaking inside. When someone asks, "How are you?" the smile reflex takes over before you can think, forming the words, "I'm good, I'm fine," even as your mind screams the truth. You feel pride at your own composure, your ability to manage a room, to keep the mood light, to absorb tension and reflect only calm. People compliment your positive energy, your grace under pressure, your unshakable optimism. Inside, you want to laugh or scream or just be honest. But the reflex has consequences that run deeper than surface comfort. Slowly you begin to conflate discomfort with danger, pain with disloyalty, sadness with a kind of failure. If you slip, if your mask falters and your sadness shows, the air thickens with tension. The people around you shift in their seats, fumble for distractions, offer quick fixes or awkward platitudes. You learn to associate your own authenticity with the discomfort of others. Every wince, every frown, every shadow across your face feels like a kind of disobedience, a rebellion against the rules you never chose, but absorbed like oxygen. You start to monitor yourself constantly, policing your feelings for signs of visible pain. The smile becomes not just a habit, but a shield and a shackle. When something truly hurts, when you lose, when you grieve, when life cracks open in ways you can't control, you hide, or you minimize, or you make a joke of it. You apologize for needing comfort. You try to make it easy for others to be around you, even when what you need most is to be seen, to be met where you really are. Sometimes you catch yourself wondering, what would happen if you dropped the mask, even for a moment? What if you let the discomfort show? What if you allowed yourself to cry, or admit you're not okay, or sit in silence until the room finds its true shape? The thought terrifies you. It feels like a betrayal, not just of the people around you, but of the fragile peace you've maintained for so long. You fear being labeled dramatic, difficult, or weak. You fear being alone with your pain, unshielded and raw. Yet, under the surface, another truth grows restless. You know, somewhere in your bones, that real connection can only come when you let the mask slip, when your vulnerability is visible, when your truth is allowed into the light. The smile reflex, once a tool for survival, now feels like a prison, separating you from the intimacy and understanding you crave. You yearn for a world where discomfort is not disobedience, where pain does not have to be hidden, where a trembling lip or tearful eye is met not with anxiety, but with empathy and acceptance. And so you find yourself caught between habits you never chose and needs you can't ignore. Every time you smile through pain, you feel a little less real, a little more distant from your own life. But every time you risk honesty, when you let the discomfort show, even for a second, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. It's not easy. The training runs deep, and the world is quick to reward the mask. But step by step, moment by moment, you can teach yourself that discomfort is not defiance, that authenticity is not a threat, and that true belonging is built not on the reflex to smile, but on the courage to be seen. The apology conditioning loop. You say sorry before you even open your mouth. The word hangs between your lips and the world, a shield and a chain, making every sentence softer, every request smaller. Sometimes you apologize for taking up space, for interrupting, for needing something as simple as a glass of water or a second chance to think. You apologize for laughing too loudly, for taking too long, for wanting more than what was quietly allotted to you by others. At first, it feels polite. Just good manners, just a gentle way to move through crowded rooms without bumping too hard into anyone else's wants. But somewhere along the way, the apologies become something else. They are no longer about smoothing over sharp edges or showing humility. They are about shrinking yourself, making sure you never seem too large, too demanding, too real. You don't remember when it started, only that it always seemed to be there, woven into your earliest memories. Maybe you grew up around people who never apologized, who taught you that wanting was dangerous, that asking was too much, that your comfort must always be purchased by someone else's inconvenience. Or maybe you watched kindness be punished and confidence be ridiculed, and somewhere deep inside, you learned that safety could be bought by the ounce, one sorry at a time. Over the years, you become an expert in the art of preemptive shrinking. You tiptoe through conversations, adding sorry to every sentence like a nervous signature. Sorry, but I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to. You become fluent in the language of self-erasure. You learn to apologize for the things you haven't even done yet, for needs you haven't expressed, for thoughts you haven't dared to think aloud. The world applauds your politeness, never noticing that your courtesy is a shroud. Your boundaries become translucent, dissolving under the acid drip of constant apology. You notice how others move. Some stride through the world as if it was built for them. They make mistakes and laugh them off. They take up space with ease, speak with confidence, ask for help as if it is their right. You envy their gravity, their certainty. You try to mimic it, maybe just for a day or an hour. But the old conditioning claws its way back. The words, "I'm sorry," rise up in your throat, involuntary, a reflex hammered into you by years of shrinking to fit the shape others preferred. And the world? The world is happy to have you small. The world is built to reward those who apologize for breathing too loudly, for questioning the script, for wanting more. It loves you cautious, unthreatening, eager to please. Politeness, you learn, can be a weapon. It cuts down anyone who dares to claim their whole space, trims their branches, whittles them into silhouettes. You wonder how many of your dreams were pruned away before you could even name them, how many joys you left behind in the pursuit of being good, of being liked, of being small enough to never inconvenience a single soul. Sometimes, someone tells you not to apologize so much. Don't say sorry, just say what you need. You want to obey, but the words catch in your chest. You were taught that a need is a burden, that your voice is a weight. Politeness isn't just a habit, it's a survival strategy. If you ask directly, maybe you'll be denied, or ridiculed, or ignored. So you make yourself smaller, one sorry at a time, hoping someone will reward you with permission to exist. But the loop is cruel. Each apology is an act of surrender. Each time you shrink, you reinforce the message. You are less than others. You are an interruption, a problem to be managed, a voice to be softened, an existence to be justified. You begin to doubt the validity of your own feelings, to question whether your needs matter at all. You start erasing yourself before anyone else has a chance to do it for you. You try to break the loop, but it's like fighting a ghost. You catch yourself saying sorry to inanimate objects, to chairs you bump into, to doors that won't open, to the world itself for asking to belong. You apologize for mistakes you didn't make, for pain you didn't cause, for simply being visible when someone else is trying to look away. The apologies pile up, tiny graves for parts of yourself you were never allowed to love. Sometimes, late at night, you wonder who you would be if you had never learned to shrink. What would your voice sound like if it was free of apology? What would your dreams look like if you let them grow wild, untrimmed by shame? Who would you have loved? What battles would you have fought? If you believed, truly believed, that your existence needed no apology, no softening, no permission, you realize that the loop was never truly yours. It was given to you, taught and enforced by others who learned it in turn, a chain stretching back through generations. You begin to see the cost, the opportunities missed, the joy lost, the love never claimed, all because you thought you had to apologize for every hope, every question, every breath. One day, you try something different. You speak without apology, just once. The words hang in the air, raw and unsoftened. The world doesn't collapse. No one scolds you. Some even listen closer. It's terrifying. It's exhilarating. You realize with a shock that truth is larger than politeness, that your needs are not a burden, that your dreams are not trespass, that your very being does not require an excuse. You won't break the loop in a day. The conditioning is deep, stubborn, a part of you that flinches at the prospect of wholeness. But with each breath, each unshrunk sentence, each claim of space that you do not apologize for, you become more real, more true. You grow, unpruned and wild, filling out the outline of your soul. And in time, you discover a gentler kind of politeness, one rooted not in apology, but in respect. For others, yes, but also for yourself. And so you walk forward, no longer shrinking, no longer sorry for needing, for speaking, for existing. You are no longer smaller than your truth. You are enough, exactly as you are. The world will have to make space for your full, unapologetic self. And if you ever feel the urge to say sorry for that, let the words stay unspoken, because you, finally, are not sorry. The like-based worth system. You feel it the moment you wake up. A twitch in your thumb, the urge to reach for your phone before you even rise from bed. The glow of the screen is the new sunrise, and your first ritual isn't breath or coffee, but checking the metrics. Hearts, likes, follows, views. Your worth, once rooted in the soil of your own heart, now lives in the shifting numbers beside your name, flickering in a current of data that never really slows. One by one, the tiny notifications roll in. Each heart is a hit of relief, a momentary confirmation that, yes, you exist, and yes, someone noticed. But it fades almost instantly. The moment passes, and the scroll begins again. Your morning isn't about greeting the world. It's about being seen, if only for a second. Somewhere in the blur, you've learned that visibility equals value. You shape yourself to fit the algorithm, carving away rough edges, softening your voice, amplifying your pain or your joy so that it glows bright enough to snare the next wandering gaze. You are content. You are product. You are performance. The line between who you are and what you share has become so thin, you sometimes forget which came first. There is a high to it, the surge of validation, the comfort of digital applause, but it's never enough. The more you chase it, the more you hunger for the next spike, the next surge, the next reminder that you're worthy of attention. You check your posts, your stories, your stats, again and again, searching for that familiar little rush. And you begin to notice something darker. A sense of anxiety that grows as the notifications slow, a hollow ache when the feed is silent. You wonder, quietly, if you matter when you aren't being measured. You wonder who you are when you're not being watched. Out there, a million others are scrolling, tapping, reacting, forgetting. You pour your heart into pixels, words, and images that vanish in seconds, flickering through the minds of strangers who will not remember you by noon. You shape your days around what might gain traction, what might make you visible for one more moment in the endless, hungry stream. Sometimes, you look up and realize an entire hour has slipped by, sacrificed to the altar of approval. And yet, underneath it all, you ache for something real, for recognition that lasts longer than a glance, for a sense of self that doesn't rise and fall with the tide of digital affection, for connection that isn't measured in hearts, but in the feeling that someone truly sees you, even when you're not on display. But this is the age of metrics. Your worth has become a number, your voice an echo in the chamber of everyone's desperate need to be witnessed. You wait for validation from strangers who forgot you before they finished scrolling. And in doing so, you risk forgetting yourself. Maybe, slowly, you begin to reclaim the parts of you that don't fit the feed. You start to measure your value in quiet moments. The way you laugh when you're alone, the calm that settles when you put your phone away, the small acts of kindness no one will ever double tap. You look for worth in the eyes of people who know your silences as well as your stories. You let your life be seen not just through screens, but in the lived and breathing world that never needed metrics to love you. It isn't easy to break the spell, to step away from the worth system you never asked for, but can't escape. But somewhere in the struggle, you remember, you are more than the sum of your likes. You are more than the speed of someone's thumb. And in that remembering, you find a kind of freedom, a quiet worth that no one can scroll past or take away. The performance identity trap, you can feel it the moment you wake up. A subtle tightening, a shift in posture, a quick inventory of expressions and angles. Before your first word, you are already calibrating, already preparing for the invisible audience you carry everywhere. Life is no longer lived, it is performed. Every gesture is calculated, every sentence rehearsed, every glance curated for impact, approval, or survival. You are not alone. The whole world has become a stage where authenticity is rationed, traded, and too often lost in the algorithms of attention. Somewhere along the way, you stopped being simply yourself. Maybe it was gradual, the way water wears away stone, the way repetition carves grooves in a mind. You learned what got laughs, what earned likes, what drew eyes and kept them. You noticed which parts of you were rewarded, which were ignored or even punished. Slowly, quietly, you let go of the unmarketable parts, the hesitations, the weirdness, the silences. In their place, you installed a performer, someone who knows how to play to the crowd, to spin every moment into something palatable, something monetizable, something safe. It's not just social media. It's the meeting room, the dinner table, the sidewalk, the way you answer the phone. Every interaction becomes a transaction in a marketplace of attention. You are always on, always conscious of the watchful gaze, sometimes real, often imagined, but no less powerful. The pressure is relentless. Every silence feels like a failure, every pause a risk. If you are not speaking, you are losing ground. If you are not visible, you are vanishing. You notice yourself becoming hyper-aware of feedback. A raised eyebrow, a pause, a delayed reply. Each one feels like a performance review. You anticipate reactions before you finish speaking, adjusting in real time to the mood of the room or the whims of the feed. You study yourself through others' eyes, editing as you go. You are praised for your adaptability, your charisma, your ability to read the room. But with each adaptation, something unrepeatable slips away. There is a thrill in being seen, of course. There are highs, spikes of approval, validation, the dopamine rush of attention well earned. But there is also a growing emptiness, a fear that you no longer know where the performance ends and the real you begins. The roles you play start to bleed together. What used to be an act for strangers becomes a habit with friends, then with family, then when you are alone. You begin to perform even for yourself, narrating your thoughts in the language of what will sound best later, imagining future applause for moments not yet lived. You realize you have become your own brand. Every post, every story, every carefully chosen word is another brick in a wall that now surrounds you. Even your silence becomes content, an absence people notice, speculate about, interpret as strategy. You feel the pull to share, to update, to explain, to perform your vulnerability and sadness as artfully as you perform your joy. You become adept at pivoting, at reframing, at spinning failures into growth, sadness into relatability, rest into self-care content. Examples are everywhere. The friend who can't eat a meal without taking a photo. The colleague whose casual joke is tailored for maximum shareability. The stranger whose candid vulnerability is perfectly lit and edited. You see it in celebrities, in influencers, in yourself. You notice the way children now learn to pose before they learn to speak, to measure their worth in clicks and views before they understand the meaning of enough. You feel a pang of nostalgia for a time when life was simply lived, messy, private, unscripted, real. The algorithm, social, psychological, technological, feeds on your performance. It rewards spectacle and speed, outrage and confession, drama and brevity. You become addicted to the metrics, even as they quietly hollow you out. You find yourself scrolling, seeking something you can never name, measuring your moments against the curated highlights of others. You become more image than substance, more echo than voice. In quiet moments, the emptiness grows sharper. You forget how to sit with yourself, how to let silence be silence, how to rest without reaching for the next performance. You worry that if you stopped, there would be nothing left. No audience, no applause, no you at all. The real you fear, is too quiet, too strange, too slow for the world's ravenous gaze. But deep down, you remember a different kind of presence, a way of being that was not for show. The child who lost track of time, who laughed without a camera, who was content to disappear. You long for it, even as you fear what it would mean to step off the stage. Who would you be without the performance? Who would stay, and who would turn away? The trap is subtle and nearly universal. The world does not want you to be real. It wants you to be marketable, manageable, measurable. But somewhere inside you, a different self survives. the one who breathes in silence, who creates without audience, who is enough even when no one is watching. It is fragile, yes, and it is hidden, but it is real. The challenge, then, is to reclaim that self, to risk uncurated moments, unbranded days, conversations that are not for show, to find people, and to become someone who can hold space for the unscripted, the awkward, the unfinished. To resist the urge to monetize every gesture, to let some things be sacred and private, to let silence simply be. The performance identity trap is powerful, but it is not inescapable. Every moment you choose to be real, to be unguarded, to be yourself without concern for the algorithm, you chip away at the wall. Every silence you allow, every truth you speak without calculation, every presence you offer without demand for attention, is an act of rebellion against the relentless stage. In those moments, life returns, not as content, but as something alive, messy, unrepeatable, yours. The silence approval contract. 0. From the very first time you speak, you sense the invisible lines drawn in the room. The air thickens when your truth cuts against the grain, even if you're too young to name what's happening. There is a contract, unwritten and ancient, that hums beneath every word. If you stay silent, you're safe. Your belonging, your reputation, your relationships remain unthreatened. But if you speak, truly speak, you feel the ground tremble underfoot, the collective structure shivering at the edge of your honesty. So, you learn the rules, not by instruction, but by 1,000 subtle corrections. A frown, a laugh that's just a little too sharp, a change in the conversation's temperature. You become fluent in social code. You practice the art of filtering, trimming the edges off your thoughts, sanding down the points that might cut someone else, or, worse, turn the room against you. It isn't quite lying, but it's not the truth either. It's survival. It's how you make it through classrooms, offices, family dinners. You know the difference between what you're allowed to say and what must remain hidden behind your teeth. You become an expert at reading the room. Before you speak, you scan for danger. Eyes that flicker away, body language that stiffens, the slight pause in someone's breath. You learn to decode silence, to recognize when an opinion, a memory, or a feeling would threaten the balance. Sometimes, you test the boundaries with a half-truth, a joke, a question that almost reaches the heart of things. Sometimes it's met with approval, a safe laugh, a nod, and sometimes it's met with silence, colder than ice, the contract reasserting itself. It's exhausting, carrying so much truth in your chest, always weighing the risk of letting it out. You rehearse conversations in your mind, imagining how things might unravel if you speak plainly. You remember the times you did, the way the group shifted away, the way eyes slid to the floor. Maybe you lost something then, a friend, an opportunity, a sense of ease that never returned. The lesson imprints itself. Silence is safer. So you become skilled at the dance. You know how to agree just enough, how to add value without threatening the status quo, how to hint at the depths beneath your words without revealing their full weight. Your truth becomes coded, diluted, disguised in metaphor or irony. Sometimes you bury it so deep you forget what the original shape was, but you never forget the cost of speaking plainly. And yet, the silence grows heavy. The more you filter, the more alone you feel, adrift among people who only know the version of you that's been edited for public consumption. You catch yourself wondering what would happen if you broke the contract. What if you named the thing no one wants to see? What if you confessed the ache, the anger, the love you carry, unfiltered? Sometimes, in quiet moments, you almost do. A late-night text, a whispered confession to a stranger, a sudden outburst that leaves the air electric and raw. For a moment, you taste freedom. The world doesn't collapse, not right away. Sometimes, someone meets your honesty with their own. A flicker of recognition, a story shared, the sense that you're not as alone as you thought. But more often, there's a cost. The mood shifts, someone withdraws, the structure you threatened slowly reknits itself, and you're left outside, a little colder, a little wiser. The contract persists because it works. It keeps families together. Business is running. Friendships unbroken, on the surface. But beneath, it breeds loneliness. You see it in the tightness around a friend's eyes, in the careful way your parents phrase certain topics, in the way laughter sometimes rings hollow when the truth is left unsaid. Everyone is performing, editing, bargaining with their own silence for a measure of safety. You start to realize that everyone has a version of the contract tailored to their life. Some contracts are stricter, enforced with threats or violence. Others are more subtle, just the pressure of social norms, the weight of how things are done. But no one is immune. Even the boldest truth-tellers know when to hold their tongue, when to filter, when to let silence win. Over time, you become more selective. Sometimes you take the risk and speak carefully with people who have earned your trust, who show they can handle the structure trembling for a moment. And in those rare conversations, when both of you let go of the contract, the connection is electric, transformative. For a while, the silence loses its power. The air clears. You remember what it's like to be fully seen, but most days, you keep the contract. You navigate the world as you've learned to, filtering, coding, protecting your truth until you know it's safe. You wonder what kind of person you'd be in a world that didn't require so much silence. You imagine a life lived in full voice, unafraid, unfiltered. Maybe in some future loop, you'll get to try again. Until then, you live with the contract, honoring it, resenting it, bending it where you can, breaking it when you must. You become a master of silence and code, a survivor in a world that demands quiet for approval. And you wait, always for the rare moment when someone else dares to speak, and you both remember what it's like to be free. The professionalism mask requirement. You wake up early, set your clothes out, rehearse your lines in the mirror. Even before you leave your home, you're already slipping into a mask. One made not of fabric or paint, but of posture, tone, and invisible concessions. This mask is professionalism. It is crisp, neutral, unobtrusive. It promises reliability and competence, and, if worn flawlessly, a ticket to belonging in the world of work. You learn early on that it's not just about how well you do your job, but about how well you wear this mask, how convincingly you can smile at the right moments, moderate your tone, and hide the parts of yourself that might unsettle, offend, or simply not fit. It starts with little things, the clothes that make you feel contained, the handshake that hides your nerves, the small talk that flattens the day's genuine joys and aches into safe, bland shapes. In interviews, you edit yourself, answering questions the way you think they want, muting quirks, shaping stories around someone else's priorities. You land the job, but the mask doesn't come off. If anything, it thickens. You read emails twice before sending, check your face in reflective surfaces, police your laughter, measure your silences. You learn the office rituals, the chain of command, the code words and conversational detours that keep the peace. Each day you feel a little less like you're performing and a little more like you're being performed, by rules that predate you, by values you didn't choose. The mask rewards conformity. You get praised for your attitude, your fit, your adaptability. But every compliment for how well you play the part is a reminder of how far you've strayed from your real self. Sometimes, after a long day, you peel off the mask and catch your own reflection. Blurred, stained, tired. You wonder if there's anything of you left beneath, or if the surface has permanently taken on the shape of someone else's expectations. Over time, the stains deepen. The mask is supposed to be temporary, something you put on for a meeting, a presentation, a difficult conversation, but soon you find you can't remove it at will. It clings to you in the elevator, in the parking lot, at dinner with friends, in your most private thoughts. It shapes your ambitions, your limits, the boundaries of what you think is possible. You lose track of which gestures are yours and which belong to the version of you built for professional approval. When you try to protest, to let your true self slip through, you're met with discomfort, or worse, a subtle withdrawal of opportunity. You learn to fear authenticity, not because you don't value it, but because you know the cost. The workplace is not always safe for raw honesty, for messy humanity, for difference. The mask, after all, is protective, insulating you from scrutiny, rejection, and sometimes even harm. But it comes at a price. Each wear leaves a stain, each silence plants a doubt, each compromise widens the gap between who you are and who you're allowed to be. Still, there are moments when the mask slips, when laughter erupts unplanned, when grief leaks through the cracks, when you risk saying what you truly think. In those moments, you feel a flicker of relief, a rush of self-recognition, the hope that you might one day find a place where the mask isn't required, where your real face is enough. Until then, you keep polishing the mask, wearing it as well as you can, even as you search for ways to cleanse the stains, to reclaim the person waiting beneath for. The world may reward the mask, but your soul remembers its own contours. Every time you resist the urge to disappear behind it, every time you dare a small act of honesty, you reclaim a little more of your real self, reminding the face beneath that it's still there, still whole, still worthy of daylight, no matter how many stains the mask has left behind. The productivity worship bond. You wake up before the sun, the alarm already an accusation. The first thought is a tally. What did you finish yesterday? What didn't you do? What still lingers in the shadowy corners of your calendar? Before your feet touch the floor, you're measuring the day in output, in accomplishments, in the silent math of what will make you enough to keep your place in the world. The quiet morning, the chance to breathe, is infected by the pressure to begin. You scroll through a feed of productivity tips, to-do lists, stories of people who hustle harder, rise earlier, sleep less. The message is everywhere, impossible to escape. If you're not producing, you're wasting. You didn't choose this faith. The world taught it to you, sometimes gently, sometimes with the sharp edge of humiliation. Teachers rewarded the students who finished first. Managers praised the ones who stayed late. Society lionized the few who never seemed to stop. You learned to translate your worth into numbers, grades, sales, clicks, hours worked, habits tracked, streaks unbroken. You learned that the idol of productivity is always hungry, always demanding, always ready to turn rest into guilt, leisure into laziness, stillness into sin. You build your days into blocks, every minute accounted for, every pause an opportunity to optimize. You have the same number of hours as anyone else, they say, as if time is only ever spent, never lived. You cross off tasks, fill in squares, move the digital needle forward, always chasing the feeling of being ahead, never quite catching it. When you stop, even for a moment, the guilt creeps in. The sense that you are falling behind, letting someone down, risking invisibility. The mind churns with imagined criticism, rehearsed explanations for why you haven't done more. You try to rest, but rest is suspicious, tinged with shame. You open a book and wonder if you could be learning something more useful. You go for a walk and find yourself composing emails in your head. Even in moments meant for pleasure, the metrics intrude, steps counted, pages read, goals tracked. The idea of doing nothing, of being unproductive, is foreign, frightening, a threat to the foundation of your self-worth. You flinch from stillness, convinced it's a prelude to failure. This is the temple of output, the cult of endless progress, and you are both worshiper and sacrifice. You compare yourself to everyone, to the curated avatars of tireless creators, to the myth of the person who never stops, who fills every gap with motion, who treats exhaustion as a trophy. You become fluent in the language of hustle, learning to hide your fatigue, to smile through burnout, to answer, "How are you?" with a list of recent wins. You lose touch with the rhythms of your own body, the signals that say, enough, the gentle invitations to be still. You notice how it bleeds into relationships. Friends cancel plans because they should be working. Partners drift apart, each absorbed in private lists, shared time fragmented by competing calendars. Even children, once wild and spontaneous, are scheduled into efficiency, taught early to produce and perform. You see it everywhere: restlessness, anxiety, the hunger for affirmation that only more output seems to feed. But the hunger is never satisfied. No matter how much you do, the bar moves. Rest becomes a luxury, a guilty pleasure, rationed in small doses. Leisure is allowed only if it can be reframed as self-improvement, meditation for focus, exercise for productivity, hobbies for side hustles. The simple act of being alive, of existing outside the metrics, is suspect. The world is a factory, and you are the product, the worker, the raw material all at once. There are moments when you break, when the weight of doing becomes too much, when the mind fogs with fatigue and the body rebels. You dream of quitting, of stepping off the hamster wheel, of reclaiming time as your own. But even in your fantasies, guilt stalks you. You worry about falling behind, about losing your place, about being forgotten. The cult of productivity has taught you to fear stillness, to see your own value as conditional, provisional, always up for audit. Sometimes, in a rare moment of quiet, you remember how it felt to be at rest, to lie in the sun, to play without purpose, to waste a day, and not call it wasted. You remember laughter that wasn't measured, love that wasn't scheduled, dreams that didn't have to justify their existence. You feel the ache of longing, the sense that something precious has been traded away for the illusion of control. You realize that productivity is a tool, not a faith, and that your worth is not measured by output. You begin slowly to question the voice that demands more, the inner critic that never lets you stop. You experiment with saying no, with choosing rest, with doing nothing and letting the world keep spinning. It is terrifying, like stepping into free fall, but it is also freeing. You start to notice the beauty in stillness, the creativity that arises when you're not trying to force it, the joy of being present for its own sake, the deep rest that only comes when you stop trying to earn it. You learn to value leisure, to honor your body's need for sleep and play, to find meaning in moments that don't add up to anything measurable. You reconnect with people, with yourself, with the world outside the temple. It isn't easy. The world will keep worshiping the idol of output. There will always be pressure to do more, to go faster, to be more efficient. But you carry a quiet rebellion in your chest, a growing certainty that you are enough, even when you're not producing, even when you're simply being. You begin to believe that life is more than a ledger of accomplishments, that rest is a birthright, not a sin. You find peace in the spaces between tasks, in the gentle unfolding of time, in the simple miracle of being alive. And slowly you reclaim your days, not for the world, not for productivity, but for yourself. The default success program. You wake each morning already running, chasing a finish line you never set for yourself. Before you even open your eyes, the script begins to load in the background. Achievement, progress, the relentless climb. It started so early you can't even pinpoint when. The voices all around you, in school hallways, family dinners, glossy magazine covers, flickering screens. They whispered what mattered, what counted, what was worth sacrificing for. You absorbed it, bit by bit, never noticing that you were being programmed, installing someone else's definition of success in the quiet, unguarded moments when you were too young to defend your own dreams. The program runs invisibly, like malware on an unprotected system. It rewards you for every grade, every accolade, every polished line on your resume. You say the right things at interviews, pick the safest paths, sign up for what everyone else calls security. Your days become a checklist: degree, job, salary, status. You collect accomplishments like badges, stacking them one on top of the other, waiting for the feeling to arrive, the sense that you finally made it, that you're finally enough. But the feeling never comes. Not really. Instead, there's a quiet sense of displacement, a hollow ache you can't explain. You celebrate your milestones and wonder why the joy doesn't last. You land the promotion, buy the car, snap the photo for social media, and within hours, you're already anxious about the next step. Each victory feels more like permission to keep running, not a chance to rest. In the mirror, you sometimes see a stranger staring back, a version of yourself built from expectations, not from desire. The saddest part is how thoroughly your own longings have been overwritten. You can't remember the dreams you had before the program began, the things that used to set your soul on fire when you were young and the world felt limitless. They've been replaced by productivity apps, networking events, visions of corner offices, and designer watches. Even when you try to pause, to ask yourself what you truly want, the answers come back filtered and foggy, shaped by a lifetime of someone else's metrics. Your internal compass spins, but the program keeps running, feeding you new coordinates. You notice it in small moments, those rare silences when you aren't performing for someone, when the notifications are quiet and the grind is paused. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of an old hobby, a childhood fascination, a calling that made you feel alive in ways no paycheck ever did. But just as quickly, the program interrupts. Not practical, not prestigious, not enough. Everywhere you look, the world seems to be running the same software. Friends compare salaries, parents brag about degrees, strangers online trade stories of burnout as if it's a badge of honor. The pressure isn't just external, it's encoded in you, running in the background, feeding on your time, your energy, your very sense of self. But what if you could uninstall it? What if you paused long enough to listen for the faint, stubborn voice beneath all the noise? The voice that remembers what it's like to want for yourself, not for a crowd. It would be painful at first, peeling back the layers of programming, facing the fear of being left behind, of disappointing others, of standing alone with your own unfiltered truth. But in that raw, uncertain space, there might be a chance to rediscover a success that is uniquely yours. A definition built not from degrees and money and status, but from the quiet, wild desires that survived all the overriding. Maybe it's not too late to rewrite the code. Maybe you can build a new program, one that celebrates curiosity over comparison, connection over competition, meaning over metrics. Maybe the truest success is refusing to run the default script at all, daring instead to become the author of your own story. And if the old program tries to reload, if the world keeps whispering its same old lines, you'll recognize them for what they are: echoes, not orders; malware, not destiny; and you, for the first time, free to decide what success really means. The Eye Contact Directive. From the moment you're born, before you understand words, your entire world orbits around glances. Those flickers of eye contact that say more than language ever could. As a child, you learn the rules intuitively, long before anyone explains them out loud. Your parents teach you with their eyes: a glance to calm, a glare to warn, a lingering look to show love. It's an ancient game, written into your instincts, a way to say, "I see you," or "I don't trust you," to invite closeness or enforce distance. But what nobody tells you is how quickly these glances turn into codes, how every second of eye contact becomes a test, a calculation, a negotiation of power and belonging. You feel it at school, at work, on the street. You sense it in elevators and on first dates, in interviews and at dinner tables. Look too little and you're dismissed as shifty, evasive, hiding something. Look too long and suspicion turns to threat. Too much eye contact feels like a challenge, a dare, a hint of confrontation. The sweet spot, the perfectly normal amount, is so narrow, so elusive, it's almost laughable. You catch yourself rehearsing it, counting seconds in your mind, glancing away and back, searching for cues in the other person's expression. It's not just about trust or intimidation, it's about control. Cultures all over the world have quietly agreed on invisible rules, unwritten directives that govern not just what you say, but how you see. In Japan, too much eye contact is seen as disrespectful, almost rude. In America, too little is interpreted as deception or weakness. There's a sliding scale for every social setting, every relationship, every passing encounter. The algorithm of eye contact is always running in the background, calibrating your status, your intentions, your place in the room. Think about all the times you've broken the directive without even knowing it. The awkward conversation where you can't meet someone's eyes, so you study their shoes or scan the horizon. The intense moment when you hold someone's gaze a beat too long and feel the atmosphere change. Electricity and discomfort blooming in the space between you. The interviews where your mind splits in two, half listening, half performing a dance of attention, nodding, blinking, holding, releasing. Eye contact becomes an exhausting choreography. Too much, and you're overbearing. Too little, and you're invisible. Even animals know this game. Stare at a dog, and it will bark or look away. Hold a cat's gaze, and you invite trouble or a test of dominance. In the wild, eye contact means everything: challenge, threat, invitation. Somewhere deep in your mind, ancient circuitry still lights up with each glance, measuring, assessing, preparing for fight, flight, or connection. The modern world magnifies this subtle dance. In the era of screens and endless digital mediation, eye contact has become both rarer and more precious. Video calls flatten your gaze into pixels. Social media rewards the curated glance, the well-timed selfie, the art of appearing present without really being seen. You practice your smile in the mirror, perfect your angle, rehearse the impression you want to give, knowing all the while that the real test is how you look, not just what you say. Examples fill your daily life. The stranger who holds your gaze a second too long on the subway. The boss whose eyes never quite meet yours. The friend who can't stop looking at their phone during lunch. Each averted glance a tiny rejection. You learn to read these signals, to adjust your own timing, to walk the razor's edge of attention and avoidance. For some, the directive becomes a trap. The socially anxious rehearse eye contact like a language exam, studying cues, fearing mistakes. The confident wield it as a weapon, pinning people in place, controlling rooms with nothing but a stare. Even silence is measured in seconds of eye contact. A negotiation of who will blink first, who will surrender the invisible contest of presence. But beneath all the rules and anxieties, something more honest lingers. Eye contact is still one of the fastest ways to know someone, to feel known. It's the shortest distance between two souls, the spark of recognition, empathy, or attraction that can't be faked. When you find someone who meets your eyes and doesn't flinch, who can hold your gaze without calculation or pretense, it feels like a door opening. For a moment, you step outside the directive, no longer trapped in algorithms of attention, but simply present, seen and seeing. Yet, you can't escape the calibration for long. The world pulls you back into the script. There are interviews to ace, strangers to appease, friends to reassure. You keep measuring and adjusting. Even as part of you hungers for the honesty that lives just beyond the rules. You wonder if it will ever get easier. If one day you'll stop performing, stop calculating, stop wondering if you're looking too long or not long enough. The eye contact directive is everywhere and nowhere, as fundamental as breathing and as fraught as confession. Every day you play the game, hoping for moments of real connection, dreading the split second when a look is misunderstood, misread, misused. The next time you catch yourself counting the seconds, rehearsing the choreography, remember, the truest glance can't be measured, only felt. The rules may guide you, but the spark is yours alone. The beauty standard trap. Every day begins with a ritual you hardly notice. Stepping in front of a mirror, searching your reflection for evidence that you're enough. Your eyes scan for flaws, for deviations from a standard that never holds still. Maybe you tug at your skin, pinch at your waist, tilt your head to see if a different angle reveals a better version of you. It's so automatic you forget it's learned. But deep down, you know this isn't just about you. It's about the shape, shade, or weight someone else decided was worth chasing. You weren't born with these measurements in your mind. As a child, you were content to exist in your body without judgment, to run, to laugh, to feel the sun on your face. But the world is a patient teacher. The lessons arrive early, subtle at first. Comments, glances, images flickering across screens. The standard is everywhere, coded into ads, movies, the feeds you scroll when you're most vulnerable. You learn the rules. Too much or too little of anything is dangerous. Curves or angles, light or dark, tall or short. Every trait becomes a commodity, measured against a moving target you can never quite reach. You start to internalize the chase. Maybe you diet, buy creams, spend hours trying to sculpt yourself into an idea that's always out of reach. You see yourself not as a person, but as a project. A problem to be solved, with enough discipline and money. You weigh your worth in grams and centimeters, filter your photos, and shrink your personality to fit the outline that's trending this week. The dissatisfaction becomes a background hum, so familiar you mistake it for motivation. But who profits from your pursuit? Behind the standard is a system, a marketplace thriving on your insecurity. Every flaw is an opportunity, a reason to buy, to subscribe, to surrender your peace for another promise of perfection. They sell you the disease and the cure, looping you through cycles of hope and disappointment. You are never quite finished, never allowed to be content, because contentment doesn't sell. You become a loyal customer to an industry that depends on your reflection never being enough. Your mirror stops being a simple tool and becomes a battleground. Each glance is a transaction, a negotiation between your authentic self and the self that might finally be approved. Some days, you win small victories. Other days, the standard feels like a noose, tightening every time you scroll past an influencer or hear an offhand comment about someone else's body. The trap is that even when you improve, the standard shifts. The line moves. New products emerge, new flaws are named, and you are back at the start, searching for a way out. The impact runs deeper than skin. You notice yourself shrinking from opportunities, avoiding photos, declining invitations because you feel unworthy. Relationships suffer. How can you let someone close when you haven't met your own quota for acceptability? You watch friends and strangers fall into the same patterns. Comparing, competing, critiquing themselves in pursuit of approval. The marketplace multiplies your loneliness, convincing you that you are alone in your struggle even as millions silently battle the same war. But the truth is, the standard is a mirage, a shimmering goalpost that recedes as you approach. It's not a reflection of your worth, but of someone else's profit motive. Your dissatisfaction is not a personal failure, it's a manufactured need, carefully cultivated by industries that survive on your self-doubt. The most radical act in this system is to step away from the chase, to refuse the invitation to see yourself as a problem to be fixed. You begin to question who benefits from your misery, and who loses when you choose acceptance. What if you could reclaim your mirror, not as a marketplace, but as a witness to your own history, your own survival? What if every scar, every wrinkle, every so-called flaw is proof that you are alive, adapting, resisting a culture that thrives on your shame? It's not easy. The beauty standard trap is sticky. Its codes reinforced at every turn. But every time you meet your reflection with compassion instead of critique, you loosen its grip. Every time you affirm the worth of someone else who doesn't fit the mold, you dismantle the system's power. You remember slowly that you were not born to be consumed or measured. You were born to be whole. The mirror is still there, but it no longer sets the rules. You look and see not a product, but a person. A collection of stories, struggles, and triumphs no standard could ever contain. The marketplace loses its power when you step out of line, when you stop feeding your life into its endless hunger for more, better, thinner, lighter, newer. And in that act of rebellion, you begin to heal. Not just yourself, but the world around you, cracking the illusion that anyone's worth can be bought or sold. The chase ends, not because you catch the standard, but because you realize it was never real, and you were always enough. The manners control grid. From your earliest days, you were told that manners are everything. Say please and thank you. Don't interrupt. Smile when spoken to. At first, these lessons seemed simple. Tiny acts that kept the world smooth, made adults nod approvingly, earned you a pass through social gates. But as you grew, you began to notice an edge to the rituals. A hidden agenda woven into every good morning and every carefully controlled silence. These weren't gestures of kindness, not really. They were the scaffolding of obedience, the invisible grid stretched tight over your real self, shaping every response until your instincts and emotions learned to wait their turn, or learned not to speak at all. You were praised for your good manners when you swallowed your frustration, for your respect when you said nothing in the face of rudeness, for your maturity when you quietly endured discomfort to keep the peace. If you hesitated, pushed back, or showed true emotion, the world stiffened around you. A cold look, a warning word, a door quietly closing. You learned that real kindness, truth-telling, compassion that challenged unfairness, warmth that broke through formality, was dangerous. It threatened the order that manners were built to protect. Bit by bit, you internalized the grid, the right words at the right time, the gentle nod, the calm smile, even when you felt anything but calm. The habits burrowed deep, becoming second nature. You started to believe that your worth lived in how little trouble you caused, how comfortable you made those with power, how quickly you could smooth awkwardness, even if that meant erasing your own reaction. Discomfort, yours or anyone else's, became an emergency to neutralize, not an opportunity for honesty or healing. Manners became your uniform, neat, reliable, unobtrusive. When someone was cruel, you met them with politeness, even gratitude, because that's what the grid required. When you witnessed injustice, your first reflex was to calculate how to phrase your concern without upsetting anyone important. You apologized for asking questions. You laughed at jokes that stung. You said it's no problem when it was, in fact, a very real problem. And every time you felt yourself shrink, a little less real, a little more distant from the pulse of your own truth. The grid rewarded you with approval, safety, and a sense of belonging that was always slightly conditional, contingent on your continued performance. The cost was your authenticity, your ability to react naturally, to push back, to express hurt, anger, or dissent. Your kindness became hollow, performative, a way to keep the system running smoothly at the expense of your own self-respect. Eventually, you start to see it for what it is. Not a culture of kindness, but a control mechanism. Manners that serve to comfort those in power and erase the honest reactions of those beneath. A system that teaches people to accept discomfort as their duty, to trade truth for approval, to dress obedience in the language of grace. You're left with a choice. Keep living on the grid, or step off and risk the discomfort of real connection, the vulnerability of honest reaction. The world may bristle when you let your feelings show, may punish your refusal to play by the old rules, but each act of genuine kindness, kindness rooted in truth, not in performance, is a small rebellion. Each honest no, each unfiltered reaction, each moment you refuse to comfort power at your own expense is a crack in the grid. It's not easy. The habits run deep, and the rewards for obedience are real, but your true self lives outside the grid, waiting for the day when kindness means honesty, manners mean respect for all, and approval is no longer bought by erasing your own reaction. Until then, every time you let your real feelings through, you reclaim a little more of your freedom and help others remember that manners, without truth, are just another way of staying quiet. The hierarchy reflex chain. You sense it before you know it. A change in the air, a subtle tightening in your chest, a 1,000-year-old whisper running through your nerves. Someone walks into the room, a boss, a parent, a peer with just enough swagger, and your body reacts before your mind can catch up. You shrink a little, your posture softens, your eyes dart away, your voice dips to a lower register. You might call it respect, or manners, or playing it safe. But in truth, it's the oldest reflex you carry. Deference to status, the hierarchy reflex chain. It begins so early you can't remember learning it. Maybe it was the hush that fell at the dinner table when your father spoke, the way you watched your teachers for the smallest sign of approval. Maybe it was the way your friends laughed a little too loud at the jokes of someone cooler, the way you swallowed your opinion in a meeting when the room tilted toward a louder voice. Each moment is a bead on a string, a lesson in how to survive by shrinking, by yielding, by knowing your place. Your nervous system, wise in ways your intellect cannot override, lights up with ancient alarms. Hierarchy means safety. Submission means belonging. Challenge means risk. Even in a world that pretends to be equal, the old code runs deep, and you obey before you realize you've moved. Sometimes it's obvious, the urge to say, "Sir," to apologize for interrupting, to nod along even when you disagree. Sometimes it's subtle, a glance away, a heartbeat skipped, a comment swallowed before it can leave your mouth. You see it everywhere, in offices where the boss's joke lands harder than anyone else's, in families where one person's anger silences the room, in friend groups that orbit around a center of gravity you can't quite name. You learn to calculate rank in milliseconds. Who's at the top, who's at the edge, who's safe to joke with, and who's better left unchallenged. You monitor tone, posture, proximity, every cue that tells you how to position yourself. Your body maps the landscape of status, plotting your movements to avoid danger and maximize acceptance. And yet, the cost is invisible but immense. Each time you defer, a piece of you contracts. You mute your own voice, betray your own boundaries, let your dreams bend around the will of someone else. Sometimes, it's as small as agreeing with a plan you know is wrong. Sometimes, it's as big as staying silent in the face of harm, watching as power is abused, feeling the burn of self-betrayal, but unable to act. You excuse yourself. It's not the right time. Someone else will speak up. I don't want to cause trouble. The rationalizations pile up, a wall built out of fear and necessity. You try to break the pattern, but it's like wrestling with a shadow. The reflex is faster than thought. You find yourself nodding along, smiling, going quiet in the presence of rank. You notice the way your laughter grows nervous, your words shorter, your body smaller. It's a kind of muscle memory, a choreography of submission that keeps you safe but costs you your truth. And the world rewards it, at least at first. You're praised for being agreeable, for knowing your place, for being easy to work with. You fit in, blend, don't make waves, but underneath, resentment festers. Your ideas go unheard, your needs unmet. The longer you stay in the reflex chain, the harder it is to remember what your real voice sounds like. You start to wonder who you'd be without the flinch, without the instinct to defer. What would you say if you weren't afraid? What risks would you take if you believed you were allowed? You watch others, the rare ones who walk without deference, who meet every gaze, who speak as if they expect to be heard. Sometimes you admire them, sometimes you envy them, sometimes you judge them. Too bold, too loud, too much. But deep down, a part of you hungers for their freedom. You wonder what it would cost to claim even a sliver of that self-assurance. The truth is, the reflex is older than reason. It is rooted in survival, in the desperate need to belong, to be protected, to avoid exile from the group. Your nervous system isn't wrong for wanting safety. But safety bought with self-erasure is its own kind of exile, a loneliness masked by the illusion of acceptance. Every time you defer when you should stand tall, you teach yourself that your voice is less, your needs are secondary, your presence conditional. You begin to see the chain for what it is, a series of linked reactions, forged by history, culture, trauma, and fear. It isn't your fault, but it is your inheritance, and what is inherited can, with pain and effort, be unlearned. You start small. You speak up once, your voice shaking. You hold someone's gaze a little longer, even when it feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. You say no, even when every part of you wants to apologize. The room doesn't collapse. The sky doesn't fall. Sometimes, someone even thanks you for it, surprised to see you claim your own space. Each act of resistance weakens the chain. It doesn't break all at once. It rusts. It loosens. It gives you room to breathe. You learn to sit with the discomfort, to let your nervous system tremble without giving in. You reclaim pieces of yourself lost to deference, your opinions, your boundaries, your dreams. You realize that respect isn't submission, that true belonging doesn't require shrinking. And if you falter, if the reflex returns, you forgive yourself. You remember how long it took to build the chain, how deep it runs. You remind yourself that your place in the world is not a gift granted by others, but a right you claim by being unapologetically real. So you walk forward, eyes open, spine straight. You recognize rank when you see it, but you do not let it shape your soul. You learn to bow only to what is worthy: truth, kindness, your own unbroken self. And in that resistance, you finally begin to belong, not to someone else's hierarchy, but to the truth of who you really are. The reputation surveillance trap. You learn young that someone is always watching, or might be. At first, it's just parents, teachers, the whisper of adult approval shaping your answers and your smile. But as you grow, the audience multiplies. Friends, classmates, bosses, neighbors, and now, an invisible horde online. You move through the world with the constant awareness that any word could be repeated, any gesture could be misread, any mistake could be broadcast and replayed forever. You live in the crosshairs of potential quotation marks and digital screens. So you become careful. You trim your thoughts before you speak, rehearse your jokes before you laugh, rewrite your apologies before you even make a misstep. Your public self becomes a project, a brand, a campaign of endless self-monitoring. You read social cues with the precision of a spy, measuring your impact, scanning for approval, preemptively managing what people might think. You feel yourself split. There's the inner you, raw and messy and unfiltered, and the version you present, endlessly edited for an audience that may or may not even exist. The trap tightens with every like, every compliment, every word of advice about your reputation. You curate your opinions, share only the victories, crop out the mess and the fear and the honest doubts. The stories you tell aren't quite lies, but they're not quite true either. You start to notice the gap growing between the person you are and the person you perform, between your soul and your strategy. It isn't just exhausting, it's eroding. You start to police your own mind, shoving away inconvenient emotions, hiding the parts of yourself that might not scan well under scrutiny. Every act becomes evidence, every silence a risk. You lose track of what you actually feel, what you really want to say, because you're always writing for the crowd, always editing for the gallery. Life becomes public relations, an endless campaign for approval, a defensive choreography of carefully managed impressions. But the crowd is never satisfied. The moment you start performing for them, they vanish. Bored, distracted, chasing another story. Your greatest fear is realized not when you're caught out, but when you realize no one is really watching, no one really remembers, and all your edits have left you with a self you barely recognize. You gave up spontaneity, vulnerability, joy, all for the sake of a reputation that exists only in rumor and potential. Late at night, when the performance is over and the screens are dark, you might feel the ache, the quiet grief of a soul that's been edited for too long. You wonder who you'd be if no one was watching, what you'd say if you weren't afraid of being quoted. What kind of freedom could exist in a life lived for its own sake, not for its press release? You ache for honesty, for the kind of existence that doesn't need footnotes, for a reputation that's earned not in applause, but in authenticity. The trap of reputation surveillance is not just that you lose your privacy, but that you surrender your truth. You begin to understand that the real danger is not being misquoted, but being erased. So busy managing your image, you forget to live the story only you could tell. And maybe, quietly, you start to dream of a life unscripted, where you speak before you edit, where your mistakes are allowed to be yours, where your soul no longer needs an audience to be real. The fear of discomfort, reflex. You learn it early, almost by osmosis. A lesson woven into glances, sighs, the pinch of embarrassment that prickles your skin when the conversation veers too close to something real. Don't be too loud. Don't make a scene. Don't ask hard questions or answer them with too much honesty. Keep things light, effortless, palatable. The world runs on comfort, and you're expected to become fluent in the art of avoiding anything that might sting, even a little. It starts small, an awkward silence after you say what you really think, a sideways glance when your laughter rings a little too sharp, a warning squeeze under the dinner table when you bring up a topic everyone else has learned to dodge. You learn to read the room not for meaning, but for danger, tracking discomfort like an allergic reaction, ready with the antidote of small talk and smiles. Soon, it's second nature. The discomfort reflex is more than a habit. It's a defense mechanism, an internal alarm that buzzes whenever truth threatens to disrupt the fragile calm. You lower your voice. You swallow your questions. You become a curator of consensus, editing yourself so thoroughly that even your thoughts learn to tiptoe. You master the gentle art of the half-truth, the white lie, the self-effacing joke that signals, "I'm not a threat. I won't make you feel anything too sharp." You notice it everywhere. Meetings full of brilliant people who say nothing of consequence, gatherings where everyone skates over the surface, never daring to dive below. Friends who flinch at the mention of pain, partners who change the subject when conversation turns to regret or loss. Whole families who pretend away entire histories, no one asking about the uncle who vanished, the fight that split the siblings, the dreams that never made it past the front porch. The discomfort reflex doesn't just shape what you say, it reshapes who you become. You grow allergic to truth, even the kind that could save you. You avoid your own pain, filing away questions you fear will hurt to answer. You start to crave comfort so much that the unknown becomes terrifying, risk unthinkable, honesty a luxury you can't afford. Your inner world shrinks, hemmed in by the boundaries of what's safe to say, feel, or imagine. The algorithm of society rewards your caution. Smooth over rough edges and you're called mature, diplomatic, easy to work with. People trust you to keep the peace, to fill the silence, to laugh at the right moments, and never dwell too long on what's raw or unresolved. You become a favorite guest, a valued employee, a pleasant partner. But deep down, a slow hunger gnaws at you, the craving for something real, even if it burns. Sometimes, truth slips through. It bursts out in the heat of an argument, in the tears that spill after too many drinks, in the rare moments when someone's pain breaks through the comfort zone. You watch as the room recoils, people scrambling to restore the equilibrium. You see the fear in their eyes, the terror of discomfort, the desperate need to fix, to smooth, to make it all okay. But you also see something else, relief, recognition, a longing for the sharp taste of honesty, even if it wounds. Examples haunt your days. The friend who never admits they're lonely, the coworker who endures in silence, the family that celebrates every birthday but never mourns what's lost. You catch yourself dodging the hard questions about your own choices, your own feelings, your own past. You see how easily you reach for comfort, how quickly you recoil from anything that might unsettle your carefully managed balance. You realize that the fear of discomfort is a trap, one that keeps you from truth, from growth, from real connection. The world becomes smaller, quieter, duller. The thrill of discovery, the rush of being truly seen, the ache of loving without guarantees. These are the things you lose when you make comfort your highest law. But something stirs beneath the reflex, a voice that refuses to be silenced. It whispers that discomfort is not an allergy to be avoided, but a teacher, a compass, a sign that you're alive. It reminds you that all the best things in life, love, meaning, growth, art, are born in the places where comfort ends and curiosity begins. To be human is to ache, to risk, to feel the sting of truth and choose it anyway. The next time your reflex kicks in, when your throat tightens, your heart races, your mind searches for a way to smooth things over. Pause. Let the discomfort in. Ask the hard question. Sit with the silence that follows. Let yourself feel the sting. Notice how the world shifts, how people wake up, how honesty sharpens the air. The fear of discomfort will always be there, a shadow at the edge of every conversation, every decision, every dream. But it does not have to rule you. In the end, you are more than your allergy to pain. You are the courage that asks, the strength that listens, the soul that chooses truth, even when it burns. The shame attachment tether. There's a feeling that creeps in before you even open your mouth, before your body even leans toward possibility, a heaviness in your chest, a tightening behind your ribs, a whisper that tells you to be careful, to step small, to think twice. This isn't just caution or common sense. It's older, deeper, wired in by lessons you learned before you could name them. It's shame, cleverly disguised as self-awareness, embedded so closely into your identity that you can't tell where your true feelings end and the warnings begin. From childhood, you were taught to believe that shame was a sign of maturity. Be aware of yourself, they said. Think about the consequences. But the lesson was more subtle, not just to consider others, but to consider how you might be seen. The world rewarded you for your hesitation, your embarrassment, your ability to hide the raw edges of who you are. You learned that every desire for freedom, every urge to speak, to laugh too loud, to take up space, came with a cost. That cost was guilt, and you paid it without thinking. It starts innocently. You're a child, running wild, shouting joy into the sky until someone corrects you. Don't be so loud, people are watching. That's not how you're supposed to act. Each time the lesson burrows deeper, your impulses are dangerous, your instincts suspect. You begin to split yourself, public and private, acceptable and hidden. The shame becomes a tether, invisible but unbreakable, anchoring every choice to the fear of disapproval. As you grow, the tether tightens. You carry it into the classroom, where raising your hand feels risky, as if your ignorance will be exposed for all to see. Into friendships, where you downplay your dreams, careful not to appear too ambitious or needy. Into love, where you hesitate to ask for what you want, convinced your needs are burdensome, your desires too much. Every bold step is pre-wrapped in guilt. Every boundary comes with an apology. You mistake the shame for self-awareness. You tell yourself it's wisdom, that you're only being responsible, careful, considerate. But deep down, you know the difference. True self-awareness brings clarity and compassion, a gentle, honest understanding of who you are and how you affect the world. Shame brings only paralysis and self-doubt, shrinking your world until it fits inside the cage of other people's expectations. The world reinforces the tether at every turn. Social media thrives on public humiliation and the performance of virtue. World until it fits inside the cage of other people's expectations. The world reinforces the tether at every turn. Social media thrives on public humiliation and the performance of virtue. Schools and workplaces reward conformity and self-policing. Even your closest relationships sometimes are built on the unspoken agreement that neither of you will rock the boat. So you grow skilled at tethering yourself. You second-guess your impulses, edit your words, shrink your body, smooth your emotions. You call it maturity, but it's only fear. The price of this confusion is enormous. The more you mistake shame for wisdom, the more you lose your connection to freedom. You hesitate to try new things, to risk failure, to express anger or joy or longing. You stop yourself before you even begin, convincing yourself that freedom is reckless, that pleasure is selfish, that the things you want most are not for people like you. You carry the weight of invisible rules, always monitoring, always measuring, always afraid. Sometimes, you catch yourself reaching for freedom anyway. You laugh too loudly at a joke, dance in public, say something raw and unfiltered. For a moment, you feel alive, whole, untethered. But then the shame surges up, hot and heavy, pulling you back in line. You replay the moment over and over, cringing at your own courage, haunted by what you imagine others must think. You punish yourself for your own freedom, convinced that guilt is the price of authenticity. But the truth is simpler and harder to accept. Shame is not self-awareness. It's a defense mechanism, a tool used to keep you small, to ensure that you don't threaten the fragile boundaries of the systems around you. Self-awareness asks, who am I really, and what do I want? Shame answers, you are wrong and you should not want at all. The tether is not your conscience, it's your training. Healing begins with recognition. You start to notice the difference between the quiet voice of self-understanding and the harsh voice of shame. You begin to ask, is this feeling truly mine, or was it given to me by someone else? You practice sitting with discomfort, allowing yourself small acts of freedom, speaking your truth, moving your body, claiming joy without apology. It isn't easy. The tether doesn't break all at once. Sometimes it tightens as you pull against it, snapping you back with the memory of every time you were shamed for daring to be more. But with practice, the distance grows. You learn to honor your impulses, to trust your desire for freedom, to forgive yourself for being human. You start to see that self-awareness and shame are not the same, and that the world needs more of the former, less of the latter. One day you wake up and realize the shame is quieter, the tether looser. You take a deep breath, speak your truth, move in the world with a little more boldness. And when guilt rises, as it always does, you see it for what it is, a ghost, a habit, not a verdict on your worth. You remind yourself that your freedom is not a sin, but a birthright, and that the world is richer for every person who learns to live unwrapped, untethered, unashamed. The Groupthink Contagion chain. It starts small, so subtle you barely notice it. You join a new group. Maybe it's school, work, family, or a crowd around you at a protest or party. There's an unspoken pulse in the air, a shared script beneath every word. You listen, eager to belong, to find your place. The conversation builds, ripples of agreement flowing like a tide. Someone says what everyone expects to hear. You nod along, even if a flicker of doubt passes through you. The nod feels harmless, even polite, but it's the first stitch in a web that grows tighter with every meeting. Agreement becomes a kind of social currency. Each yes, each echo of the group's opinions buys you a little more acceptance. You learn quickly. Questions cool the room, doubts shift the mood, and silence can brand you as outsider. To be safe, you lean into consensus, even if your gut prickles. Your uncertainty becomes invisible. The group's comfort becomes your mask. With every round of agreement, your original opinion fades. The chain of consensus tightens. You notice yourself parroting ideas you barely examined, opinions you never held before. The urge to fit in is stronger than the urge to be right, and in the warmth of belonging, your doubts blur. Safety feels sweet, even addictive. The group praises team players, admires loyalty, rewards unity, and quietly discourages dissent. You don't want to be the difficult one, the skeptic, the killjoy. So you join the applause, the laughter, the chorus of belief. Soon you can't recall where your own thoughts end and the group's begin. You defend the consensus as if it's your own conviction. Contradictions and flaws in logic slip past you, or get explained away with shared jokes or new rules. Those who question too loudly are gently excluded, then quietly erased. Their absence is a warning, a silent threat. Disagree, and lose your place. Over time, the chain becomes a cage. The longer you agree, the less you can see. When doubts do return, they're unwelcome guests, quickly shut down with internal excuses. If everyone believes it, it must be true. They're smarter than I am. It's better not to cause trouble. Your sense of reality warps to fit the group's comfort. Dissent feels dangerous, even shameful. Your mind trades clarity for safety, agreement for truth. The groupthink contagion chain is efficient and invisible, spreading from person to person like a social virus. It shapes families, organizations, even entire societies. Once, you might have challenged a flawed idea, but now you reassure yourself that there's strength in numbers. You forget that sometimes, the loudest crowd is the one running the wrong direction. Eventually, someone new comes along, someone unafraid to break the chain. Their questions crackle like static in the room. You feel a jolt of discomfort, even anger. But also, if you're honest, a flicker of relief. Maybe they're wrong, or maybe they're the first fresh air you've breathed in ages. Agreement brought you safety, but safety brought blindness, and now the cost is clear. You traded your own vision for the comfort of not standing alone. In that moment, you have a choice. Keep nodding or pause and think. True belonging doesn't require blindness. It asks for courage. It asks for voices that can say, gently or fiercely, I see it differently. Every honest doubt breaks the chain a little more, freeing not just you, but everyone who ever feared to question what everyone else believed. The emotional neutrality mask. You learned early that emotions are dangerous things. Anger is too much. Sadness is too heavy. Joy, when it bursts out of you, must be polite, trimmed to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. You see it in 1,000 small lessons, in the way adults flinch at your tantrums, the way teachers reward the children who smile quietly and keep their hands folded. You notice how people back away from sorrow, how laughter that's too loud can make a room go silent. Bit by bit, you learn to sand yourself smooth, to file the sharp edges off your own weather. You become a master at wearing the emotional neutrality mask. It's invisible to the world, but heavy on your bones. Every time anger rises, you swallow it, biting down until your teeth ache, letting your jaw do the work your voice is never allowed to do. When sadness pools in your eyes, you blink it away, lift your chin, practice the art of, I'm fine. Even happiness comes with rules. Don't gloat, don't draw attention. Keep your excitement modest, contained, a carefully wrapped gift you're never allowed to fully open. The world rewards you for this mask. You become easy to be around, reliable, level-headed. People tell you how much they admire your calm, your steadiness, your ability to let things go. Inside, you know it's a performance. Your own feelings, policed and edited, trimmed to the bare minimum required to be human. You become adept at reading the room, calculating how much emotion is allowed, how much will tip the balance, how much will make you a problem, an inconvenience, a story someone else tells about that person who overreacted. Sometimes you meet people who express their feelings freely, who shout when they are angry, weep when they're sad, burst into laughter at their own private jokes. You envy their wildness, their refusal to shrink, the way they move through the world unmasked and unafraid. Part of you aches to join them, to feel fully, to let your insides spill out without fear. But the old lessons are strong. You keep your mask in place. You don't want to be too much. You don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. You don't want to risk rejection for the sake of being real. The mask comes at a price. Each feeling you sand down leaves a residue, grit beneath the surface, a quiet ache that never leaves. You lose the ability to trust your own emotions, to know what you really feel. Anger, once denied, becomes numbness or anxiety. Sadness, locked away, curdles into exhaustion. Even joy, if trimmed too often, grows flat, a polite smile that never reaches your eyes. You move through life muted, a faded echo of the self you might have been. It affects your relationships, too. You love people with caution, always aware of the risk of showing too much. You listen well, but hold back your own pain, afraid of burdening anyone with feelings you've been told are too heavy. Conflict terrifies you. You'd rather yield than argue, rather apologize than risk anger. Even your happiest moments are tinged with restraint, a self-consciousness that keeps you from dancing too wildly, laughing too loud, loving too fiercely. You try to break the pattern, but the mask clings tight. The first time you let yourself get angry, the world flinches. The first time you weep in public, someone tells you to cheer up, to look on the bright side, to be strong. The mask was given to you by people who needed you small, who were scared of their own feelings, who couldn't teach you how to weather the storms. You learn to forgive them, slowly, as you begin to forgive yourself. Sometimes, alone, you let yourself feel. Rage that shakes your bones, grief that drowns you, happiness that fills the room like sun through an open window. You realize, with a shock, that you are still alive beneath the mask, that your heart still beats wild and strong. The mask cracks a little, lets in light, lets out color. You taste the full spectrum of your emotions for the first time in years, and it hurts. It hurts, but it's also a relief. You begin to practice unmasking, just a little, with people who feel safe. You let anger slip into your voice, let tears wet your cheeks, let laughter come unrestrained. Some people draw back, startled by the intensity of what you've hidden. Some people lean in, recognizing themselves in your honesty. Each time you risk it, you grow stronger, more real, less ashamed of your own weather. You come to understand that the mask kept you safe once, but it cannot keep you whole. The world needs your real feelings, the anger that draws boundaries, the sadness that deepens empathy, the joy that invites others to celebrate with you. You are not too much. You are not too heavy. You are simply alive, and that is always enough. You walk forward, carrying the mask when you need it, but learning to put it down, to trust the world with your unedited self. You learn that your emotions are not offenses. They are invitations, bridges, the roots of every true connection. The sharp edges you once hid become points of light, refracting truth in all directions. You are no longer sanded smooth. You are whole, wild, gloriously unfinished, a spectrum of feeling finally set free. The gender behavior lock. You're taught the rules before you even know what rules are. They arrive in gentle corrections, in scoldings disguised as love, in the way adults frown or beam when you behave the right way. They slip in before memory takes shape. Smile more, don't be so loud. Sit like this, walk like that. Be strong, don't cry, don't show too much, don't want too much. Each command is tiny, almost invisible. It's just the way things are done, they say. The way girls act, the way boys stand, the things real men don't do, the things proper women always remember. You learn not just from words, but from glances exchanged over dinner, from laughter that lands just a little too sharply, from praise that always follows a certain pattern. The lock clicks into place early, but it's so quiet you don't even know it's happened. You become a child learning not just language and numbers, but choreography. Your body, your voice, your desires are rehearsed, corrected, softened, hardened, shaped by hands you can't see. If you're a girl, you're told to smile more, to shrink your presence, to keep your knees together, to avoid anger. If you're a boy, you're told to toughen up, to keep moving, to never show fear, to laugh at pain. Crying is discouraged or forbidden. Gentleness is admired, but only if it stays inside the lines. Boldness is encouraged, but only when it fits the script. The world teaches you the code, how to survive, how to belong, how to earn love by performing the right version of yourself. And it's not just family or school, it's everywhere. The TV shows you watch, the heroes you're given, the stories you're told. Every movie, every cartoon, every commercial teaches you a little more about what you're supposed to be. A boy who shows tenderness is laughed at. A girl who shouts is quickly shamed. A boy who dances is watched closely. A girl who dreams too big is cautioned to be careful. If you try to slip out of your lane, the correction is instant. Sometimes with words, sometimes with looks, sometimes with nothing at all but a chill in the room. The decades go by. The commands become automatic. You don't even have to think them. They're built into your posture, your voice, the shape of your smile, the depth of your laughter. You become an expert in your own performance, anticipating expectations before anyone speaks. You sense, with an animal's precision, when you've stepped too far, when you need to dial it back, when you should push forward or melt away. You learn to measure your words, to fold away your real feelings, to keep your true longings secret even from yourself. Sometimes, you wonder who you might have been if no one had given you the script. If you could have played as wildly as you wanted, cried as freely as you felt, spoken as honestly as you needed. If you could have chased every dream that sparked in you, loved without calculation, moved through the world without checking yourself at every turn. But the training is deep. It's not just in your mind, it's in your muscles, your breath, the tilt of your head, the careful dance you do with every authority, every crowd. There are moments when you try to break the lock. Maybe it's late at night when no one's watching and you let yourself laugh too loudly or cry until your body shakes. Maybe it's in the quiet company of someone who sees you, not the version you've polished, but the raw, trembling core you've kept hidden for so long. For a moment, you taste freedom. For a moment, you imagine what it would be like to live without the lock, to let your soul move the way it wants to, unfiltered, unmeasured, untamed. But the world is waiting. You step outside and the training returns. You smile when you're expected. You hide your rage or your sorrow. You make yourself smaller or bigger as required. You notice how even strangers enforce the rules, how the cost of disobedience is exile, mockery, violence, or just a loneliness too sharp to bear. The risk of breaking the lock is real. The world has ways of punishing those who stop performing. Still, something inside you refuses to be erased. Maybe it's the child you were before the training began. Maybe it's a voice that grows louder every year, a quiet insistence that your soul was never meant to be edited for the comfort of others. You start to notice the cracks in the lock. You see friends, lovers, even strangers who've begun to break the script, who show their sorrow openly, who love who they want, who speak with voices that tremble with truth. Each time you witness realness, something in you grows bolder. You test the boundaries. You let a tear fall in public. Or you laugh when you're supposed to be quiet. You speak the desire you've hidden. You show the pain you've buried. Sometimes the world pushes back. Sometimes someone else whispers, "Me too." Over time, you realize that the gender behavior lock was always a lie, a safety mechanism built to control, to comfort, to keep everyone in their place. You see that the script is arbitrary, that all the rules can be rewritten, that the wildness in you is not a threat, but a gift. It's not easy. The habits run deep, and the risk is real. But every time you choose authenticity, you loosen the lock a little more. You reclaim another piece of yourself. You start to imagine a world where no child learns to perform instead of live, where softness and strength, joy and sorrow belong to everyone, without apology or restraint. This is not just your fight. It's the quiet rebellion of millions, shaking off decades of commands that never fit. It's a revolution born in the silent moments when you let yourself be real, when you refuse to shrink or harden or hide. It's a promise to yourself and to the world that you will not spend your life editing your soul for a crowd that only ever wanted you to be smaller, quieter, easier to control. You are more than your training, more than your performance, more than the commands you were given before you could even speak. Behind the lock is your real self, alive, messy, whole, and ready to be seen. The passive listening conditioning, it starts early in classrooms and kitchens with lessons that are never spoken but always understood. You learn to listen, to wait, to hold your questions behind your teeth. The world rewards you for your patience, for the quiet nod, for folding your hands and keeping your eyes up, attentive but never disruptive. Every time you wait your turn, every time you let another voice finish, even when their words tangle and twist in your gut, you are praised, good listener, well-mannered, respectful. The lesson is clear. Attention is virtue. Stillness is strength. Listening is safety. So you practice. You become skilled at shrinking yourself, making space for other people's stories, their opinions, their pain. You become the friend who never interrupts, the student who lets others speak first, the child who sits in the back seat and absorbs everything. You grow fluent in silence, nodding encouragement as others fill the room with their noise. You start to see yourself as a witness, a background presence, someone who brings calm just by listening. And the rewards keep coming. Praise, trust, the warm approval of adults who say, "You're so mature for your age," never guessing what you sacrificed to earn their favor. But what the world never teaches is when not to listen, when the voice speaking deserves to be stopped, when silence is complicity, when waiting your turn is a kind of surrender. You learn the hard way that not every story deserves your attention. Some voices are wrong, cruel, or dangerous. Some ideas should be interrupted, challenged, even silenced. But the conditioning runs deep. Every time you feel the urge to speak up, a warning flares. Don't interrupt. Don't be rude. Don't make a scene. You swallow your objections, your outrage, your fear, and become a vessel for words you do not believe. It's in the moments you replay later, sleepless and frustrated. The joke that was more poison than punchline, the lie dressed as truth, the cruelty wrapped in laughter. You hear them all, trapped by your own manners, the rules that taught you to value other people's comfort above your own conviction. You watch as harm goes unchallenged, as ignorance spreads, as someone else's authority crushes your instinct to stand up and say, "Stop." This is the hidden cost of passive listening. You become allergic to your own voice, afraid to break the rhythm of another's story, even when that story wounds. You become the reliable audience, the background character who never disrupts the scene. You learn to question your instincts. Was that really wrong? Or am I just sensitive? Should I speak up? Or will I be the problem? The lessons you learn so young begin to bind you, turning your silence into habit, your habit into self-erasure. You see it everywhere if you look. Meetings where the loudest voice wins by default, classrooms where the timid never get their turn, families where secrets are protected by a hush so thick you can barely breathe. Online, the dynamic intensifies. Trolls and bullies monopolize the thread, while thoughtful dissent is drowned out by the etiquette of letting everyone have their say. We confuse patience with virtue, silence with wisdom, listening with obedience. But there are moments, rare and vital, when the urge to interrupt is not rudeness but survival. When someone spreads hatred or lies, when a friend repeats a story that hurts, when power abuses its microphone, the right thing is not to listen. It's to object, to disrupt, to put yourself between the voice and the harm it causes. Yet even then, the conditioning hesitates. You second guess, you apologize as you speak, you soften your words until your protest sounds like agreement. Examples fill your past. The classmate who bullied others while teachers looked on, the uncle whose jokes stung for years, the boss whose monologues left no room for dissent. Each time you sat silent, hands folded, listening because you were trained to believe that silence is noble, that your discomfort is a price worth paying for peace. But inside, something rebelled, a voice straining against its leash, a rising certainty that you owe more to the world and to yourself than passive assent. You begin to see the power of interruption, not as a breach of manners, but as a declaration of boundaries, a refusal to be a silent participant in someone else's agenda. Interruption can be justice. It can be protection. It can be the first breath of courage after years of silence. The world will resist, will call you rude, disruptive, too loud. But the truth is, some stories only change when someone is brave enough to disrupt their telling. The next time you feel that familiar tension, the urge to break in, to object, to refuse to be just an audience, pause and listen, not to the voice speaking, but to the one inside you. Ask what is lost if you remain silent, what is gained if you risk being heard. Remember that listening is powerful, but it is not always enough. Sometimes the greatest act of respect is not to let someone finish, but to say clearly and without apology, "That's enough." The world needs witnesses, but it also needs interrupters, people who refuse to let the wrong voices own the room. Your voice matters, your instincts matter, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop listening, stand up, and speak. The polite rebellion trap. You grow up hearing stories of rebels and revolutionaries, those who broke the rules, stormed the barricades, burned down old systems to build something new. You're told that change requires force, that power never yields except to the bold. But when it comes time for you to take a stand, to challenge what feels wrong, your rebellion is shaped by the world that raised you. You speak out, but quietly. You protest, but politely. You say no, but always with a smile. It starts with the smallest acts. Maybe you disagree in a meeting, but you soften your voice, pad your critique with compliments, apologize for your opinion before you've even shared it. Maybe you skip a family gathering in protest of an old hurt, but you write a careful message, promising to come next time, making sure no one feels truly abandoned. You demand fairness, but only when you're sure it won't make things awkward. Your anger is wrapped in patience, your disappointment couched in empathy. Your rebellion is real, but it's always gentle, always tidy. The world rewards you for it. Friends call you mature, colleagues praise your diplomacy, elders nod approvingly at your composure. You become the model of the good protester, someone who raises concerns without making anyone uncomfortable, someone who points out injustice without challenging the people who benefit from it. Your softness is a shield and a chain, protecting you from backlash, but also limiting your impact. The system you push against absorbs your resistance, smooths its edges, files it down into something it can tolerate, even celebrate. You start to notice the trap. Every time you rebel within the rules grow stronger. You argue for change, but only in the ways allowed. You question authority, but never cross the invisible lines that would make your disobedience truly dangerous. You become an expert at dissent that doesn't disrupt, protest that doesn't provoke, negotiation that never risks real conflict. Your voice becomes another cog in the machine, your no, another yes in disguise. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if you let the anger show, if you spoke the truth without softening it for someone else's comfort. You imagine the shock on their faces, the tension in the room, the possibility that someone might actually listen. might actually be forced to change. But then you remember all the ways you've been trained to stay small. The teacher who scolded you for tone, the boss who warned you about team spirit, the friends who went silent when you pushed too hard. The message was always the same. Rebellion is acceptable, but only if it stays polite. You see it everywhere. The meetings that go in circles, the protests that are approved by City Hall, the radical ideas that are only radical because they were discussed in a gentle tone. You see people exhausted by the performance of dissent, drained by the effort to be heard and liked at the same time. You see how the system learns to use your manners against you, to welcome your critique as proof of its own openness, even as nothing really changes. The cost is subtle, but deep. Over time, you begin to doubt your own anger, to mistrust the sharp edges of your frustration. You start to believe that the only valid resistance is gentle, that anything stronger is dangerous, selfish, rude. You hide your real opinions, swallowing the words that might burn bridges, keeping the peace even when the peace is a lie. Your rebellion becomes a performance, a way to feel better without risking the consequences of true defiance. But deep down, a part of you is restless. You recognize the fatigue that comes from holding yourself back, the ache of self-censorship. You realize that change, real change, has never come from the polite dissenters alone. It comes from those willing to be disruptive, inconvenient, disliked. It comes from those who risk breaking the frame instead of decorating its edges. You start to wonder what you might accomplish if you stopped worrying about approval, if you let yourself be loud, messy, uncompromising. It isn't easy. The habits of politeness run deep, the fear of exclusion sharper than you want to admit. But sometimes, in moments of honesty, you let yourself imagine rebellion with teeth, a no that is absolute, a protest that disrupts, a voice that shakes the room instead of soothing it. You wonder who you might become if you trusted your anger, if you stopped apologizing for your resistance. And in that imagining, you find a glimpse of freedom. You realize the system doesn't fear your polite rebellion. It counts on it. It survives by absorbing your gentleness, framing your dissent as progress, applauding your manners while ignoring your message. The only thing it cannot absorb is your refusal to play by its rules. The only thing it cannot tame is your willingness to speak and act without permission. So you stand at the edge of the trap, holding both your gentleness and your rage, and you decide. You can still be kind, still be thoughtful, still seek understanding. But you can also be fierce, unapologetic, willing to break the contract of comfort when the world demands more. You learn that rebellion, to matter, must sometimes be impolite. That change, to last, must be uncomfortable. And that you, to be truly free, must let go of the need to be welcomed even as you challenge what needs to fall. You rebel. This time, without the smile. And the world, for a moment, feels the difference. The time ownership illusion. From the moment you open your eyes in the morning, there's a quiet lie waiting to slip around your neck like a silk noose. The illusion that your time belongs to you. The clock on your wall, the digital glow of your phone, the planners, calendars, and reminders that crowd your day, they whisper a single message. You are the owner of your time. But as the hours slip past, you begin to sense something is wrong. It feels like you're in control, and yet by nightfall, your day has been parceled out, sold off, traded for obligations you never really chose. And so, you lie in bed, haunted by the ache of another day spent everywhere but where your soul needs to be. Consider this. You don't own your time. Not really. You rent it out, lease it in pieces, barter it for things that sometimes matter and often don't. From the first days of childhood, your time is structured by someone else. School bells dictate when you wake, when you eat, when you're allowed to speak, even when you can go to the bathroom. As you grow, the calendar only tightens its grip. There are meetings, appointments, deadlines, commitments, each one a small surrender, a slice of your finite hours traded away for a fleeting sense of safety or approval. It feels like progress, like productivity, but beneath the surface, your soul begins to wither. Think about how you answer when someone asks for a favor. You flip through your mental schedule, not for what you want, but for what you're allowed to do. You measure your time not by joy or curiosity or longing, but by what's already been promised away. Even when you sit down to rest, your mind twitches with anxiety, guilt for unreturned calls, emails left unread, errands still unfinished. You schedule vacations months in advance, only to find those days encroached upon by new obligations, urgent requests, and the ever-present expectation to remain available, responsive, productive. Work is the most obvious thief. You trade your hours for wages, your best energy for someone else's mission. For many, work begins before sunrise and seeps into every margin of the day. You check email at midnight, you join meetings during lunch, you wake early to get ahead on tomorrow's tasks. Your calendar fills up with blocks of time that no longer feel like yours at all. You become a ghost in your own life, present, but only in the spaces left over after everyone else's needs are met. But work is only part of the illusion. Even outside the office, time is sliced into fragments and sold off to obligation. Family, friends, social events, volunteering, endless tasks that never seem to end. It's not that these things are bad, or that you don't love the people you give your time to, but the habit of giving until you are empty is so deeply ingrained that it becomes invisible. You feel guilty for wanting solitude, selfish for craving time alone with your own thoughts. And so you say yes when you mean no, and each agreement costs you a few more hours, a little more of your peace. You try to claw back a sense of ownership. You download productivity apps, make to-do lists, schedule me time in your planner. But even this becomes another performance, another way to optimize, to wring the last drops of utility from your day. Rest itself becomes transactional, measured in how much better you will perform tomorrow. Sleep isn't sacred, it's a means to an end, another box to check before the cycle begins anew. Every so often, life throws you a shock, illness, heartbreak, a loved one's death, and for a brief searing moment, you see the truth. Time is not a renewable resource. Each day is a currency you'll never earn back. The illusion of ownership falls away, and you feel the terror and the freedom of your own impermanence. But soon enough, the obligations return, the calendar reasserts its claim, and you slip back into the rhythm of selling off your hours, forgetting that your soul has needs that cannot be met by anyone else's schedule. The deepest pain of this illusion is not just the exhaustion, but the slow, silent erosion of self. When was the last time you spent a full hour simply listening to your own thoughts? When did you last move through a day without a plan, without an agenda, allowing curiosity or wonder to guide you? How often do you protect the hours that make you feel most alive? Those quiet mornings spent writing, the walks at dusk, the laughter with friends who understand your soul, the creative pursuits that no one else ever sees. Society rewards those who give their time away, who hustle, who multitask, who fill every moment with visible, measurable output. But the most vital hours are the ones that can't be measured, scheduled, or explained. The hours you spend grieving or dreaming or marveling at the way sunlight slants through a window. The hours spent in silence or in conversation that has no goal but connection. The hours spent in the wilderness of your own mind, wandering through memories, desires, fears, and hopes. These are the hours that restore you. These are the hours your soul remembers. The illusion of time ownership is hard to break. It's stitched into the fabric of your relationships, your ambitions, your sense of self-worth. To reclaim even a fraction of your time feels like an act of rebellion, an assertion that your life is not simply a ledger to be balanced, but a story to be lived. It means saying no when everyone expects yes, risking disappointment, stepping out of the endless stream of obligation. It means letting go of the myth that you can always do more, always be available, always fill your hours with usefulness. And yet, when you dare to reclaim your time, the world does not collapse. The urgent emails go unanswered and the sun still rises. The invitations you decline are quickly forgotten. The tasks that seemed essential fade in memory. But the hours you save, the hours you keep for yourself, become holy. You find in those stolen moments a version of yourself you thought you'd lost. The part that dreams, the part that feels joy for no reason. The part that knows in its bones that time cannot be owned, only honored. So tonight, before you surrender another day to the illusion, pause. Ask yourself, if your time was truly yours, how would you spend it? What does your soul need that cannot be scheduled, sold, or optimized? You may not be able to reclaim every hour, but you can reclaim this one. And in doing so, you begin to break the illusion, to remember that your life is measured not in the pieces you give away, but in the moments you claim as your own. The friendliness mandate loop. You learned it long before you understood what it meant. Be nice. Be friendly. Smile, even when you don't feel it. Soften your voice, round off your words. Keep your tone light and your laughter gentle. Be safe for other people. It wasn't kindness they asked of you. Not really, it was harmlessness. A careful, practiced, non-threatening presence, designed to put everyone else at ease, even when it meant shrinking yourself until you barely existed at all. You grew up in the loop, the unspoken mandate that your value lay not in your character, your creativity, or your truth, but in your ability to make others comfortable. You learned to sense a room's temperature the moment you entered, scan for discomfort, for anxiety, for the flicker of irritation in someone's eyes. Make yourself responsible for fixing it, even if it was never yours to fix. Lower your eyes. Don't ask hard questions. If someone raises their voice, shrink yours. If conflict sparks, extinguish it with your smile. The loop was everywhere. School, family, friends, strangers. Such a nice kid, they'd say, as if nice was your highest calling. You became a master at friendliness, turning it into a shield. Be approachable. Don't make waves. Don't be too much. The praise came easily when you made yourself small. You learned to hide your irritation, mask your disappointment, redirect your anger into helpfulness. Even your kindness was repackaged as service. Make everyone feel at home, even if you never truly belonged to yourself. Sometimes you watched others claim space without apology, set boundaries, speak their truth, even at the risk of making someone uncomfortable. You admired their courage, but learned to label it as rude, difficult, selfish. After all, you'd been taught that real kindness was self-erasure, the art of dissolving into the background so no one ever felt threatened by your presence. The loop turned politeness into obligation. Every frown was a problem you were meant to solve. Every moment of tension a crack you had to fill with niceness. You lost track of your own feelings, trading authenticity for acceptability. Your voice grew softer, your needs smaller, your dreams folded into neat, forgettable packages. You learned to laugh at jokes you didn't find funny, agree with opinions you didn't hold, apologize for emotions that might upset the balance. It wasn't kindness, it was survival. You learned that being non-threatening was the fastest route to approval, the surest way to avoid conflict or rejection. People called you a good listener, a loyal friend, the glue that held groups together. But they rarely saw the cost. The moments you stayed silent when you should have spoken, the loneliness of always being the safe harbor, but never the ship. You became the person people trusted to never rock the boat, even when you were drowning. As you grew older, the loop became harder to escape. Friendliness became your default mask, worn so long it started to feel like skin. You hesitated before expressing anger, always searching for a nicer way to be honest. You questioned every instinct, afraid that one wrong move would shatter the fragile safety you provided. Even when someone hurt you, you smiled and offered understanding, keeping your sharpest edges sheathed for their comfort. The world rewarded you, up to a point. You made friends easily, soothed conflicts, won praise for your ability to smooth rough waters. But over time, you noticed how people expected you to absorb their discomfort, to take responsibility for moods you didn't cause, to offer forgiveness before anyone apologized. You saw how being safe made you invisible, how friendliness became a trap, a loop that kept you circling the same safe, shallow relationships. You tried to step outside the loop, to speak your mind without softening the truth, to let frustration show, to risk being too much or not nice enough. At first, the guilt was overwhelming. The urge to apologize, to explain, to patch things up was automatic. You worried that you'd lose friends, that people would see you as selfish, unkind, or cold. Some people did. Others, though, leaned closer, relieved to finally know the real you. Complex, flawed, sometimes prickly, but never fake. You learned that real kindness is honest, not just agreeable, that safety can be a cage as much as a comfort. That being truly approachable means letting people see you whole, not just the smiling mask, but the human underneath, with needs and anger and sharp truths. You learned to set boundaries, to say no, to let discomfort happen without rushing to erase it. You discovered that respect is earned by being real, not by being safe. It wasn't easy. The loop had become a reflex. Even now, you catch yourself slipping back, softening your words, biting your tongue, smoothing the air for someone else's comfort. But you know the cost. You remember the emptiness of always being nice, the ache of friendships built on your ability to disappear. So, you move forward, learning to balance approachability with authenticity. You offer kindness, but not at the price of your own truth. You make space for other people's discomfort, trusting that it won't destroy you or them. You become not just friendly, but real. You take up space. You let yourself be seen in all your complexity, knowing that the world needs your truth far more than your harmlessness. And in this new honesty, you discover a freedom you never imagined, a life where kindness is chosen, not required, and where you are no longer trapped in the friendliness mandate loop. The permission dependency chain. From the time you're small, you learn to wait. Raise your hand before you speak. Ask if you may. Stand in line. Wait for your turn, for approval, for the green light to move forward. The world rewards obedience, the smooth predictability of children who don't question, who wait to be told what to do and when to do it. And so, the habit grows, quiet and invisible, threading its way into your muscles, your voice, your dreams. You don't notice it at first, because it's everywhere. Teachers teach you to ask before you try. Parents remind you of rules, of needing to earn every privilege, every new step, even your earliest hopes. Climbing higher, wandering farther, daring to speak out, are gently tethered to an adult's nod or frown. Every "may I" answered with a yes or no. Every risk calibrated against someone else's sense of readiness. Somewhere along the way, you internalize the logic. Movement needs permission. Growth needs validation. Ambition waits for a stamp of approval. So you learn to pause at the threshold, waiting for the signal. You draft the message, but wait to send it. You have ideas, but wait to share them. A dream kindles in your chest, but you wait for a sign that says you're allowed. Every day is spent half holding your breath, scanning for approval, for a voice or an email or a glance that says, yes, now, you can go. What you don't see is that the waiting was taught. It isn't a law of the universe, just a deeply rooted reflex, reinforced by 1,000 small cues. The slow line in the hallway, the fear of getting in trouble, the pride in being called well-behaved. The world teaches you to stand by for permission so skillfully that by the time you're grown, you hardly realize you're still waiting. You may not even know what you're waiting for. Sometimes the yes never comes, and so you shrink your ambition to fit inside the boundaries someone else drew. You doubt your own instincts, second-guess your excitement, shelve your boldest plans because no one stood up and said, you're ready. You build your dreams out of contingency. If they approve, I'll try. If they ask, I'll speak. If they need me, I'll step up. You might spend years in the wings, rehearsing for a spotlight that never turns on. And yet, the truth is brutal and simple. You already had permission. You just never got the memo. The door was open, the road unblocked, the world waiting for you to move. But the habit of waiting is so deep, so subtle, that you never step through. You wait for someone else's blessing, someone else's timing, even as your own sense of purpose tugs at your sleeve, quietly asking, why not now? Why not you? The permission dependency chain is invisible until you tug on it. The first time you move without being told, the first time you speak up before being called on, the first time you risk rejection or failure because you're done waiting, it feels like breaking a spell. Your heart pounds. Your mind fills with doubt. But the world doesn't end. In fact, it opens. A little wider, a little brighter, revealing that so many boundaries were just illusions, maintained by the fear of acting without a sign. You start to notice the places where you handed over your agency. In conversations where you waited to be included, in ideas left unspoken, in chances left untaken. You realize how many of your peers are waiting too, glancing sideways, wondering who will go first. The chain is collective, a culture of hesitation passed down like folklore, maintained by mutual caution. But the truth remains, the only memo you needed was the one you write for yourself. The world is full of people who never wait for permission, who break rules gently or loudly, who trust their own readiness, who blaze trails simply because they believe go is a word you can say to yourself. They fail, they get bruised, but they move forward. And every time they do, they make the path easier for the next person to step out of line and onto their own road. So, here's what you missed in all the waiting. You were always allowed. You could have spoken, built, run, tried. The yes was yours to claim, not to earn. The only thing you needed was the courage to break the dependency chain and give yourself the memo. You are allowed. Now, go. The normalization algorithm trap. It begins with a glance, a gesture, a laugh that echoes a little too loudly across a room. You watch the people around you, reading the atmosphere not for truth, but for safety. What are they wearing? How do they stand? How do they talk or joke or avoid uncomfortable silences? Before you know it, you're doing the same, mirroring their words, their smiles, their habits. You tell yourself you're just blending in, adapting, being flexible. But deep down, something older and more primal is at work. You are caught in the normalization algorithm trap, where culture becomes contagion disguised as choice. No one ever says it out loud. You're told you have free will, that your life is a story of self-determination, every decision uniquely yours. But somewhere along the line, the boundaries between your will and the group's expectation blur. You start copying what everyone else does, not out of fear, but because it just seems easier, safer, less exposed. If enough people do something, it becomes normal. If it's normal, you feel compelled to join. The algorithm is invisible, but its pressure is everywhere. You see it first at school, where standing out is dangerous and blending in is currency. The clothes, the slang, the music, none of it is accidental. Trends sweep through the halls like a virus, and resistance feels futile. You notice how quickly weird becomes wrong, how the things that used to thrill you get filed away, replaced by whatever is safe to share, safe to wear, safe to want. The algorithm runs quietly in the background, rewarding conformity, punishing difference, turning your mind into a node in a network of imitation. It doesn't stop with adolescence. At work, in families, in friend groups, even online, you calibrate yourself by scanning for consensus. The lines between what you want and what everyone wants grow thinner every day. You find yourself eating foods you don't love, laughing at jokes that make you uneasy, scrolling past stories that once would have shocked you. The culture shifts, and you shift with it, sometimes so subtly you can't even pinpoint when your preferences stop belonging to you. Social media accelerates the process, amplifying the algorithm to new extremes. What's trending becomes what's true. What goes viral becomes what's valued. You feel yourself being swept along, chasing validation in likes and retweets, reshaping your opinions to fit the currents of approval and outrage. You think you're making choices, but most of the time, you're just following the path of least resistance, one that's been worn deep by millions before you. You notice how quickly the abnormal becomes normal. The first time, it shocks you. The second time, it amuses you. The third time, you participate. By the 10th time, you can't remember ever feeling differently. The algorithm is ruthless. It doesn't need to persuade you with logic or argument. It just shows you enough repetition until your resistance wears away. Until what was once outrageous is now routine, what was once taboo is now trend. Examples are everywhere. The foods we crave, the slang we use, the ways we love or grieve or protest. All of them are shaped by what surrounds us, by the silent code of consensus. History is full of atrocities that began with a whisper and grew into a chorus, of kindnesses that only caught fire because someone dared to make them visible. The normalization algorithm has no conscience, no brakes. It just runs, remapping your sense of reality with every loop. But there's a hidden cost to all this copying. You start to lose your ability to tell where you end and everyone else begins. Your tastes, your dreams, even your outrage begins to feel borrowed, performed, filtered through the lens of what's expected. The longing to belong becomes a fear of being left out, a hunger for approval that never quite gets satisfied. You wonder if you have any choices left that are truly your own. There's an ache at the center of the trap, a suspicion that your life is being written by someone else's script. You try to rebel, but even rebellion has been normalized, commodified, wrapped in a brand and sold back to you. You search for authenticity, but find it harder and harder to distinguish from performance. The algorithm is clever. It adapts. It learns your habits. It offers you the illusion of choice while tightening the loop. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a part of you resists. It's the voice that wonders why you laughed at that joke, why you posted that opinion, why you followed that trend. It's the part that remembers who you were before you were trained to copy, before you were conditioned to adapt, before you traded curiosity for conformity. The challenge, then, is not to escape the algorithm entirely, but to notice it, question it, slow down the reflex to imitate, and choose, even if just for a moment, something that feels genuinely yours. You start small. You pause before you click, before you agree, before you repeat what you just heard. You let yourself remember what you love when nobody else is watching, what you believe when the room is empty. You make space for discomfort, for difference, for the possibility that normal is just another word for common, not for right or good. You reclaim your boundaries, even as the algorithm tries to blur them. The normalization algorithm trap will never disappear. Culture will always be contagious, and belonging will always tempt you to copy what you see. But every time you notice the loop and choose otherwise, even in the smallest way, you remind yourself that you are more than a pattern, more than a product of your surroundings. You are capable of choosing, and in that choice, you find your freedom. The loneliness control protocol. Loneliness isn't just an emotion. They taught you it was a verdict. From the very first time you saw a classmate standing by themselves at recess, from every story where the villain's punishment was isolation, from every movie where the hero's triumph was love, partnership, inclusion, you learned early. Being alone is failure. If you are alone, something is wrong with you. And if you want to belong, you must always say yes, even to the things that don't fit. The people who don't see you, the chains that come with company. It's not an explicit lesson. No one hands you a rule book. It arrives in 1,000 small signals: the awkward glance when you eat alone, the pitying tone in a friend's voice when you say you spent the weekend by yourself, the advice to get out there, make new friends, find someone, as if solitude is a sickness and connection the only cure. You watch people celebrate connection for its own sake, even as they carry invisible bruises from the compromises they've made to avoid empty rooms and echoing silences. So, you internalize the protocol. Do not be alone. You say yes to invitations you don't want. You laugh at jokes that don't land, agree to plans that drain you, hold on to relationships that have long stopped feeling like home. You become a master at reading the room, at hiding your discomfort, at stitching yourself into the fabric of any group, no matter the cost. The thought of stepping away, of sitting in the quiet with only your own thoughts, becomes unbearable. Anything is better than that, you tell yourself. Anything. The world reinforces the lesson at every turn. Social media turns solitude into a spectacle. Count the friends, show the parties, document every brunch and trip and handshake. Loneliness becomes not just something to be avoided, but something to be ashamed of. If you're not surrounded, celebrated, invited, you wonder what you did wrong. You never stop moving, never stop connecting, always seeking the next distraction, the next person to prove you're not failing. But the price is subtle, insidious. You begin to accept things that hurt you, simply because the alternative, being alone, seems so much worse. You let partners mistreat you, let friends drain you, let jobs consume you. You tell yourself that a bad relationship is better than none, that an empty conversation is better than silence. The chains come quietly, hidden in laughter that doesn't reach your eyes, in hugs that don't bring comfort, in the persistent ache of not being seen even in a crowded room. Sometimes, you catch a glimpse of what's really happening. In a pause between conversations, in the stillness of an early morning, you feel the weight of company that's only company by name. You wonder if you've traded your freedom for a feeling of belonging that doesn't quite fit. You ask yourself if it's possible to be lonelier surrounded by people than you ever would be on your own. The answer scares you. You push it away, return to the protocol, tell yourself you'll figure it out later. You watch others do the same, staying in marriages that hollow them out, clinging to friendships that ended years ago, working in offices that sap their energy. You see the lines between connection and captivity blur. The difference between being chosen and being trapped fade. You realize how easy it is to mistake proximity for intimacy, attention for love, chains for comfort. The world tells you to accept anything, as long as you're not alone. But loneliness, you start to learn, is not a punishment. It's a space, a gap where truth can surface, where you can remember who you are when no one else is watching. The protocol was designed to protect you from pain, but instead it numbs you, keeps you running in circles, chained to people and patterns that don't serve you. Freedom, you begin to suspect, is not found in never being alone, but in knowing you can survive the silence, can even learn to welcome it. It takes courage to break the protocol, to say no to the invitation, to leave the group chat, to walk away from relationships that ask you to shrink. The first days are hardest. The silence feels like failure. The empty chair across from you at dinner is heavy with accusation. But slowly, the room begins to change. The quiet becomes gentle, restorative. You hear your own thoughts for the first time in years. You rediscover things you love, pieces of yourself you had buried under the noise. You start to see connection differently. You choose it rather than chase it. You learn that the best company is that which respects your solitude, that the truest love is the one that lets you be alone without making you feel abandoned. The chains slip off, link by link, as you realize that loneliness is not the enemy. The real enemy was the fear that drove you to accept less than you deserve. You look around and see that everyone carries this fear, some heavier than others. You meet people who are learning, as you are, to make peace with solitude, to trust themselves, to find strength in the spaces between. You find your tribe not by never being alone, but by being honest about when you are. The protocol weakens, its power fading as you step into your own company, no longer afraid. In the end, you discover that loneliness is not a verdict, not a failure, but a frontier, a place to meet yourself, to rest, to heal, to prepare for the kind of connection that never asks you to trade freedom for company. You realize that it's better to walk alone than to wear chains just to fill the silence. And in that choice, you become free, not from loneliness, but from the fear of it. The success envy engine. There's a hunger gnawing at you, a restlessness you can't quite name. It surfaces whenever you scroll through social media, glance at your neighbor's car, hear a colleague's promotion announced, or see your friend's vacation photos glowing with filtered sunlight. It's the hum of the success envy engine, a machine you never chose to build, but were trained to maintain from your earliest days. Somewhere along the way, you were taught to measure your life not by your own compass, but by the gleaming markers of someone else's journey. You were shown what to want before you knew what you needed. You were handed a checklist. Bigger, better, faster, richer, higher, more, and the engine started to run. The fuel for this engine is everywhere. At home, the question is never, what do you love? But, why aren't you more like them? In school, you're shown the right answers, the right colleges, the right paths, each a mile marker along someone else's highway. If you stray, if you pause to wonder about a road less traveled, the world gently or harshly nudges you back. Achievement is not for the fulfillment of your own potential, but for validation, proof that you can keep pace with the herd, that your life glitters just as brightly as the next. So, you start to want what they have, without knowing why. You see the trophy on their shelf, the applause at their party, the smile on their face when the crowd says, "Congratulations." You imagine that success will feel the same for you, if only you can capture the same moments. Your dreams, the ones whispered in childhood or blooming quietly in the dark, are pushed aside. They gather dust while you chase new goals, bigger paychecks, fancier degrees, longer titles. You become a collector of symbols, a keeper of borrowed ambitions, and each time you reach a milestone, the satisfaction is fleeting. The engine stutters, then revs up again. The line you're racing toward moves just out of reach. Someone always has more, or sooner, or better. Your pride dissolves into restlessness, your victories into comparison. You never really arrive. You just loop the circuit, fueling the envy that keeps you running, running, running. Meanwhile, the dreams that actually fit you, the life that would make you exhale in contentment, the talents that spark joy, the relationships that feel real, the work that sings to your soul, sit untouched in the attic of your heart. Every so often, you feel a pang, a memory of who you were before the world told you what to want. You might find yourself daydreaming at your desk, or feeling inexplicably hollow after a big achievement. In those moments, you hear a faint knocking, the sound of your own dream asking to be remembered. The world rewards you for keeping the success envy engine running. You're praised for your ambition, your hustle, your willingness to do whatever it takes to make it. But underneath the applause is a quiet question. Is this truly your dream, or someone else's? The answer is uncomfortable. It means admitting how many of your choices were shaped by comparison, by longing for a life that was never meant for you. Some people never stop the engine. They run until they're spent, accumulating trophies that lose their shine, chasing approval that never quite satisfies. Others reach a breaking point, a burnout, a crisis, a moment of startling clarity when the emptiness becomes unbearable. Only then do they dare to look inward, to sweep the dust off the dreams they left behind, to ask, what do I want really? Who am I when I stop comparing? Reclaiming your true ambition is an act of rebellion. It means facing envy, sitting with discomfort, questioning stories you've been told about what success is supposed to look like. It means letting go of borrowed desires, accepting the risk that your own path might not win applause, or likes, or instant respect. It's terrifying. It's also the only way to find peace. So pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what parts of your life are running on envy, and what parts are running on joy? Which dreams have you inherited, and which are waiting, patient and dusty, for you to claim them? The world may keep praising you for what you chase, but only you will ever know the quiet power of chasing what's truly yours. In the end, the only race worth running is the one toward your own longing. The only trophies worth keeping are the moments when your soul recognizes itself in your choices. Let the engine stall, let the envy rust, dust off the dreams that fit, and let your own life finally begin. The trauma silencing contract. You learn quickly which stories are allowed and which are not. You see it in the shift of a friend's eyes, the uncomfortable silence in a crowded room, the way people suddenly find something else to do when pain shows its face. You hear it in gentle corrections, in subtle shushes. Let's not dwell on the past. It's better not to bring that up. Are you sure you want to talk about it? Trauma makes people uncomfortable, so you're told, in words and in gestures, to keep it quiet. You sign the contract without reading it, trading your right to speak your truth for the fragile peace of making others feel safe. You don't remember agreeing, but the contract is everywhere. Maybe it's in the way your parents change the subject when your voice cracks with old hurt. Maybe it's in the way your friends listen politely for a minute, then steer the conversation back to lighter things. Maybe it's in the way professionals praise your resilience, when what they really mean is your ability to smile and say, "You're better now." You see the contract written in invisible ink on every surface. Don't bring up the things that make others uncomfortable. Don't bleed in public. Don't remind people that pain is real, that it lingers, that it shapes everything you are. So you learn to mute it. You shrink your story, sand off the edges, retell it in a way that flatters the listener. You say, "I'm fine now," even when you're not. You call your silence healing, and sometimes you almost believe it. You become skilled at pivoting away from your own rawness, finding humor in the horror, focusing on the positive, showing only the parts that make you seem strong, never broken. The applause comes quickly. You're so brave, so inspiring, so well-adjusted. No one sees the ghost behind your eyes, the wounds held together by silence and willpower. But silence is not healing. It's a slow erasure, a way of teaching yourself that your pain is unworthy, your truth too heavy for polite company. You begin to question your own memories, to wonder if you're exaggerating, if maybe it wasn't so bad after all. You learn to distrust the part of you that aches to speak. You become a master of swallowing words, of choking back tears, of forcing your trauma into a box so small you almost forget it's there, until it leaks out in other ways. Sleepless nights, sudden anger, a sadness you can't explain. The contract is binding, even in your closest relationships. You want to tell someone how you really feel, but the fear is greater. The fear of making them uncomfortable, of being too much, of breaking the illusion of normalcy that keeps everyone moving forward. You edit your story before it leaves your lips, turning confessions into anecdotes, pain into lessons, grief into gratitude. You become an expert at comforting others with your wounds, showing them only the healing, never the hurt. You see others carrying the same contract, moving through the world with stories locked behind their teeth. You recognize the flicker in their eyes, the long pause before they answer, the way they say, "It's all good," when you know it isn't. You understand the weight of pretending to be whole for the benefit of those who can't bear to see the cracks. You want to reach out, to share your pain honestly. But the rules are clear. Silence is safer for everyone. But the price is loneliness. Healing, you realize, is not the absence of pain, but the freedom to bring it into the light. Real recovery means letting yourself be seen. Not just the strong, shiny surface, but the scars and the struggles. The days when you can't pretend. It means risking discomfort, both yours and theirs, for the sake of truth. It means breaking the contract, tearing up the rules, learning to believe that your story deserves space in the world, even when it's hard to hear. You start small. You say what happened, even if your voice shakes. You name your pain, even if the room grows quiet. You refuse to smile when you want to cry. Some people look away. Some draw closer. A few admit their own pain, grateful for the invitation to be real. Each time you break the silence, the contract loosens. You feel less alone, less ashamed, less convinced that healing means hiding. You learn that discomfort is not cruelty, that honesty is not a burden, but a bridge. You discover that speaking the truth is an act of courage, not selfishness. You find people who can sit with your pain without needing to fix or minimize it. People who see you whole, not just healed. With them, you begin to reclaim your voice, to trust that your trauma is not a curse, but a testament to survival. The world will always be full of people who would rather not hear your pain, who will urge you to be quiet, to move on, to heal in silence. But you know now that silence is not healing. You choose honesty. You choose connection. You choose to break the trauma silencing contract and let your voice ring out, clear and unashamed, in a world that desperately needs to remember that pain is real and so is hope. The gratitude weapon loop. It starts as a lesson in kindness. Be grateful for what you have. Maybe you're a child, staring at a plate you didn't choose, a gift you didn't want, or a world that doesn't always fit your growing shape. At first, gratitude feels like magic. You learn to see what's good, to cherish small joys, to give thanks for every ordinary blessing. And yes, gratitude is real, and it matters. It softens the heart. It helps you survive. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the lesson shifts. Gratitude stops being a door to wonder and starts becoming a weapon. You hear it when you speak of wanting more, or of feeling restless, or of seeing injustice. Someone somewhere smiles as they wield the old phrase, "Be grateful." It's a warning disguised as wisdom. You have food, why ask for better? You have a job, why dream bigger? You have love, why question if it's enough? The world around you has learned that silencing a voice is easiest when you can call it ingratitude. Every longing for more is recast as selfishness. Every question is disloyalty. Every hunger is a threat to the fragile order of things. The gratitude weapon loop is a subtle muzzle passed from parent to child, teacher to student, boss to worker, friend to friend. It arrives at the moment of your smallest rebellion, when you want to speak up, to improve, to ask for what you truly need. It's wielded by those in power, but just as often by those who are afraid. If you dare to want, you are told you are greedy. If you point out what's broken, you are accused of not seeing what's whole. If you demand fairness, you are told you have too much already. And so, you start to shrink your dreams. You edit your complaints before they leave your lips. You practice gratitude not as a path to joy, but as an armor against criticism. You tell yourself to accept, to settle, to find contentment in whatever crumbs the world will offer. You muzzle your own ambition, police your own hunger, reassure yourself that others have it worse, as if suffering is a contest, as if longing is a sin. But under the surface, resentment festers. The truth is, you can be grateful and still want more. You can cherish what you have and recognize what's missing. You can bless your present and still build a better future. When gratitude becomes a weapon, it is only wielded to maintain power, to keep you in your place, to stop you from questioning the systems that benefit from your silence. You start to notice how often the phrase is used to end conversations, not begin them. You see gratitude turned into a lid, pressed tightly over discomfort and injustice and heartbreak. You hear it echo in politics, in workplaces, in families. Everywhere people are told to accept less because they already have something. Gratitude is real. But gratitude is not obedience. It is not complacency. It is not a reason to stop asking for more. True gratitude doesn't muzzle your voice. It frees it. It gives you strength to see both the beauty of what is and the possibility of what could be. It lets you honor your blessings while still fighting for better. It reminds you to notice the sun on your face, the friend by your side, the luck that brought you this far. But it never asks you to settle for less than you deserve, or to pretend that pain isn't real, or to keep quiet when you know in your bones that something must change. The gratitude weapon loop is a cage built out of good intentions and fear. The way out is not to abandon gratitude, but to reclaim it. Make it yours. Use it as a foundation for growth, not a muzzle for your ambition. Say thank you, and then ask for what you need. Bless your life, and then build something even better. The world changes only when people dare to want more, even as they hold what they have with open hands and honest hearts. Gratitude is your birthright. It is also your fuel. Don't let anyone turn it into your cage. The be humble command. You are taught from the beginning that humility is a virtue. Be humble, they tell you, in voices that sound wise and gentle and impossibly old. Don't boast. Don't get too full of yourself. Wait your turn. Downplay your gifts. You hear it everywhere, in classrooms, in boardrooms, at family dinners, and whispered behind hands. It sounds like protection, a shield against arrogance, a way to keep yourself tethered to reality. But over time, the command starts to morph into something sharper, something that cuts instead of grounds. You learn quickly. Speak the truth, but not too confidently. Know your worth, but don't act like it. Share your ideas, but make sure you soften them. Tuck in the edges. Apologize for your passion before it can be mistaken for pride. Every compliment you receive comes with a warning glance, a reminder to keep your head down, to add just lucky, or it wasn't all me. You become fluent in self-effacement, in minimizing your achievements, in shrinking the parts of yourself that draw too much attention. At first, you believe it's about balance. You don't want to be arrogant. You see what happens to people who take up too much space. The pushback, the isolation, the rumors. You tell yourself humility is about empathy, about leaving room for others, about not letting your ego become a shield against growth. But as time passes, you notice the line keeps moving. The definition of humility shifts, subtly and relentlessly, until it's no longer about balance at all. It's about erasure. You start to see the command for what it is, a code word for shrinking. You watch as friends who burn with talent dim themselves to make others comfortable. You see leaders apologize for their success, teachers soften their intelligence, artists disclaim their originality. In every field, in every culture, there's a script. Don't be too much. Don't claim your brilliance. Humility is safety. You become so skilled at not bragging, at fading into the background, that eventually you start to disappear from your own story. The world rewards your compliance. You are called gracious, approachable, likable. You get invited back, trusted, given just enough approval to keep you in line. But inside, something begins to ache. You start to wonder what might happen if you spoke without fear, if you stood tall without apology, if you let your light shine as brightly as it wanted to. You start to realize how many opportunities you've passed up, how many dreams you've downsized, just to avoid being labeled as arrogant. It's not just about you. The be humble command echoes through families, teams, entire societies. Children are told to wait their turn, women to speak more softly, people from certain backgrounds to be grateful for what they have rather than reach for more. The message is clear. Humility is not about truth, but about containment. It's about managing perception, keeping the collective comfortable, making sure no one rocks the boat. You see entire groups self-edit, suppress, hold back. Not because their gifts are lacking, but because their confidence is policed. But humility, real humility, was never meant to be a muzzle. It's supposed to be a stance of curiosity, a willingness to learn, an openness to being wrong. It's not an excuse to hide your strengths or minimize your worth. The danger is when humility becomes a mask, a defense against the risk of being truly seen. You shrink, not because you lack power, but because you've been taught to fear the consequences of using it. Examples are everywhere. The writer who downplays their bestseller as just luck. The engineer who apologizes before presenting an innovative idea. The activist who says, "I'm no expert, but," before launching into a truth that could change everything. You watch as their words land softly, safely. The brilliance dulled by disclaimers, the vision shrunk by habit. You wonder how many revolutions, inventions, breakthroughs have been smothered by the be humble command. And you notice, too, who gets to ignore it. Some are celebrated for their boldness, their audacity, their refusal to shrink. They are called visionaries, disruptors, leaders. The same confidence that earns them respect is punished in others. The command to be humble is not distributed equally. It is used to manage, to contain, to ensure that the right people stay small. You begin to question your own reflexes. How many times have you stepped back when you should have stepped forward? How often have you deflected praise, downplayed your ideas, surrendered the spotlight out of fear that confidence would be mistaken for arrogance? You see how shrinking has become a habit, a reflex you perform, even when no one's watching. But something in you resists. You start to reclaim your voice, your pride, your right to be more than humble. You realize that true humility is not about dimming your light. It's about letting it shine without the need for comparison or apology. It's about honoring your gifts and sharing them boldly, knowing that your confidence does not steal from others. It inspires them. The next time you feel the urge to shrink, to soften, to apologize for your own worth, pause. Remember that humility is not an excuse for hiding, but an invitation to lead with both strength and openness. The world does not need more people who play small. It needs people who are humble enough to know their limitations and brave enough to claim their brilliance, fully, unapologetically, out loud. The invisible chain of chains, freedom. The word alone is intoxicating. A promise, a birthright, a song that echoes through every culture and every age. You tell yourself you are free. You feel it in your bones, wear it like armor. Every choice, every opinion, every dream seems to reinforce the narrative. You are not bound. You are not controlled. You are the author of your own story. But what if that certainty is the most sophisticated chain of all? What if the belief in your freedom is itself a part of the system, designed to keep you inside the cage? It starts with the stories you're told. Heroic tales of rebellion, of overcoming, of individuals breaking through walls, of societies toppling tyrants. Every story ends with the same moral. Freedom is possible. Freedom is yours. You learn to equate choice with liberation. You believe that because you can pick between this and that, say yes or no, move here or there, you are truly in control. But look closer. Who gave you the choices? Who built the boundaries of your playground and painted them invisible? You begin to sense the pattern in subtle ways. The job you love is the one you were told to aspire to. The fashion you wear was chosen for you seasons ago by unseen hands. Even the music that makes you feel wild and original was crafted, curated, and fed to you by an algorithm that knows your habits better than you know yourself. You convince yourself your opinions are your own, that your rebellion is unique. But when you look around, everyone seems to be expressing themselves in remarkably similar ways. The system's greatest trick is not to impose chains you can see and fight, but to install chains so cleverly that you defend them, celebrate them, mistake them for wings. Every time you question the rules, a new rule appears, this one labeled freedom. You move from one cage to the next, never realizing that each is designed to feel more open than the last. The idea that you've escaped becomes its own leash, tugging you back whenever you get too close to true awakening. You notice it in your habits of thought. The slogans you repeat, think for yourself, don't be a sheep, break the mold, are themselves mass-produced, passed from one would-be rebel to the next. Your desire to be different, to stand out, to carve a unique path, is anticipated, provided for, absorbed. Even your doubts, your skepticism, your so-called cynicism are part of the script. You find a community of others who question everything, but somehow you all question in the same way, fall back on the same comforting conclusions, never breaking through to something truly original. The invisible chain is reinforced every time you congratulate yourself for seeing through a lie. The moment you declare, "I'm not fooled," the system smiles, content in your certainty. It doesn't need to stop you from running. It only needs you to believe you've reached the edge, that there's nothing left to see, nothing left to fight. You stop searching. You stop doubting your own awakening. The system knows how to give you just enough slack in your leash to feel the wind in your hair, and just enough comfort to keep you from straining against the collar. Sometimes, in rare flashes, you sense the depth of the trap. You notice how even your language, your desires, your sense of right and wrong have been sculpted by hands you've never seen. You realize how your need to escape is always directed toward new forms of consumption, new identities, new authorities to follow. You wonder if true freedom would feel less like satisfaction and more like terror, a vertigo of the soul, an emptiness that cannot be filled by any product, belief, or tribe. The hardest truth to swallow is that there is no outside. Every time you think you've exited the maze, you find yourself in a bigger one. The system is fractal, recursive. It adapts to your resistance, digests your rebellion, and sells it back to you as the next big thing. Even the urge to break free, to be free, is itself programmed. And so, the invisible chain of chains tightens, not with force, but with comfort, approval, and the illusion of agency. Does this mean all resistance is futile? Is there no such thing as freedom? Not exactly. The first taste of true freedom comes from recognizing the trap, from understanding that even your sense of liberation can be manipulated. Freedom is not a feeling, not a slogan, not a brand or a badge of identity. It's an endless practice, a willingness to doubt not just the system, but your own role in it, your own satisfaction, your own certainty that you've escaped. You begin to question the source of your desires, to interrogate the shape of your thoughts, to look for the hands behind the curtain. You realize that freedom isn't a destination. It's a process, a restless discomfort, a refusal to stop digging. It's the courage to admit you may never be fully free, and the refusal to accept easy comfort as evidence of arrival. So you live awake, eyes open to the invisible, unafraid to challenge even your own sense of control. You understand now that the deepest chain is the belief that there are no more chains. And in that understanding, you become, if only for a moment, free.